In a valley, there once lived 3 princes. The first prince is Saryan, who is wise but always sickly. The second prince is Garyan, who is highly skilled in martial arts. The last prince is the beautiful Sinyul. His beauty is said to captivate even ghosts, but he has an evil nature. He seduces the king's concubine and she becomes pregnant. The king is so furious that he banishes Sinyul and even considers ending the baby's life. However, he changes his mind because the child still carries his blood. Instead, he gives the baby to his lowest servant and names her Soru, meaning a nuisance born from tears. As Soru grows up, she truly lives up to her name. She cries and screams every day, claiming that a ghost is coming to eat her. Her constant crying and strange visions become unbearable, so the king orders her to be locked up and starved to death. On the 10th day of Soru's imprisonment, lightning strikes the palace and causes a massive fire. Strangely, Soru survives without a single injury. Soon after, she begins to hear an eerie song. The song says, "Whoever eats Princess Soru will gain a new body and become human." The monsters start fighting each other over who gets to eat her. In the end, the ugliest monster eats all the others. Unfortunately for it, that leaves it too full to eat Soru, so it settles for taking her eyes and runs away. For Soru, it all feels like a dream. When she wakes up, she hopes bad things won't start happening again and thinks that maybe she doesn't want to keep avoiding people anymore. Years later, the warrior Jayan is furious with King Garyun for what he did to him, while his lieutenant Biryong tries to calm him down. Jayan complains that he lived like a dog on the battlefield for an entire year because he believed the king's promise to give him a princess's hand in marriage. Now, the king suddenly says he will marry Princess Soru instead of Princess Garan, and Jayan takes it as a direct insult. Biryong tells him that even if the king played him, the king still can't treat him carelessly. Jayan snaps back, shouting that he was treated like a dog. When Biryong says that this is because Jayan isn't strong enough, Jayan grabs him, but Biryong keeps talking anyway. He reminds Jayan that he is the eldest son of a once famous warrior family whose fortune is fading, and that even his exceptional martial arts skills aren't enough. That is why he agreed to go to war in the first place. Biryong adds that if Jayan marries a princess, even if it is just for show, he will become part of the royal family, and soon he will gain power no one can ignore. Jayan throws Biryong to the ground and says there is a rumor that anyone who gets involved with the ghost girl, Soru, will die. He then vows that he will never marry her. Biryong reminds him that his goal is to unite his entire family with the king. He then says he isn't telling Jayan to give up on revenge. Instead, he advises him to marry Soru and keep her somewhere out of sight. Once Jayan gains enough power, he can make Garan his wife. Biryong also warns him not to assassinate Garyun just yet. Jayan says he will repay them for the humiliation, and that Garyun will pay dearly for playing with him. In a small, secluded house, Soru sits on her bed as ghosts surround her, threatening her. Exhausted, she tells them to just eat her already, but the main ghost refuses. It even threatens to bring the other ghosts back to life if they touch her, and says it will eat the servants instead. Soru shouts that it should take her life and leave innocent people alone, which only makes the ghosts laugh. They keep mocking her until she hears a human voice outside calling her name. The person says the king has summoned her, and Soru wonders if he has finally decided to end her life. 2 servants enter and clean her up, clearly terrified that something bad might happen. The ghosts continue taunting her as the servants lead her out of the house and into a room in the main palace. They tell her to close her eyes. When she opens them a few minutes later, she is shocked to find herself beautifully dressed. She grabs one servant's hand and asks what is happening. The servant, shaking with fear, tells her that she is being dressed for her marriage to the eldest son of the Yato family, Jayan. Soru decides that Jayan must have done something terrible for the king to punish him by making him marry her. The servant quickly explains that Jayan is actually a war hero, and the king said he deserved to marry a princess. Soru thinks Jayan must have asked for Garan instead, whose beauty is said to rival a heavenly fairy, and that the king twisted his request. The main ghost then asks Soru how it should tear her new husband apart, and the other ghosts eagerly join in, arguing over how they will end him. Soru can only think that poor Jayan is about to lose his life, even though he saved the entire country. Once the servants finish dressing her, they lead her to the place where the wedding will happen. On the way, Soru makes up her mind. After the wedding, she will ask Jayan to send her far away so the ghosts will leave him alone, if he's lucky. And once she gets there, she will ask him to end her sinful life. The moment she steps close to Jayan, all the ghosts suddenly scream and scatter in every direction. Some creatures watching from a dark corner witness what happens between Soru and the ghosts. They rush to report to their master, who is drenched in blood. They find what they saw suspicious, but decide it's best to continue with their plan anyway. Their master agrees, though he tells them to wait a little longer. He is still starving, and turns back to feasting on a human. As Soru approaches, Jaeyeon looks at her in surprise. He had imagined the ghost princess would look terrifying, almost like a specter. But instead, she is much smaller than he expected, plain and ordinary. When Soru lifts her head to look at him, King Garyun snaps at her for daring to do so, scoffing that he thought she was blind. Jaeyeon silently notes that the rumors about the king being abusive are true and decides to keep out of it. After the ceremony, the parade begins, and Jaeyeon can't wait for everything to end. When the gates open, a crowd is already waiting. They stare openly, whispering that the king tricked him into marrying the ghost princess. Some laugh at him for ever thinking he could marry Princess Garen. Others murmur about the rumor that anyone who gets involved with Soru will die. Even the king mutters to himself that this will be the end of the Yato family. Unable to endure the stares and whispers any longer, Jaeyeon suddenly jumps down from his horse and storms back, shouting the king's name. At that exact moment, masked rebels burst in, wielding swords, and chaos erupts as people run for their lives. Soru's palanquin crashes to the ground and she hits her head, confused about what is happening. Hearing the screams, she assumes the ghosts have begun hurting people. A masked man grabs her, covering her mouth, and whispers that he is taking her away on someone's orders. Before he can move her, Jaeyeon kills him. He shoots Soru a sharp glare before turning and walking away. She remains seated, blood splattered around her, unable to comprehend what she just saw. A human has cut down a ghost. She also remembers how all the ghosts vanished the moment she got close to him, and begins to wonder if that could truly be possible. Jaeyeon turns back to the rebels and plunges straight into the fight. He presses his sword against one of them and quickly realizes something is off. Their clothes are strange. Nothing like what he's seen before, and they clearly know martial arts. This doesn't feel like a group that came to the palace to steal a few valuables. For a moment, he wonders if they are even real rebels. Then he decides it doesn't matter. He's angry, and cutting them down feels good. When he notices the palace guards just standing around, frozen in fear, he yells at them to pick up their swords. He even shouts at Bir-young to get into the fight. Just as Bir-young moves to help, he spots flames licking up the palace walls and urgently calls Jaeyeon's attention to the fire. The rebels use the distraction to escape. Jaeyeon considers chasing after them, but quickly changes his mind and turns toward the fire instead. He doesn't care what happens to the palace itself, but he refuses to let the flames spread into the city. He orders the guards to fetch water from the pond and put out the fire. One trembling guard asks what they should do about the rebels who got away, and Jaeyeon snaps that the fire comes first. If they happen to catch any rebels, they can tie them up later. As the guards rush off, Bir-young tells Jaeyeon that his battlefield reputation clearly wasn't for nothing. The soldiers are following his orders more closely than their own commanders. Jaeyeon glances at his injured hand and thinks that admiration is far better than pity. That's when Bir-young notices Soru. She is crawling on the ground while people pass her by as if she doesn't exist. Someone even steps on her fingers and keeps walking without a second glance. Bir-young urges Jaeyeon to go check on his wife. Jaeyeon tells him to go himself if he's so concerned, and casually mentions that he plans to send her away anyway. Before he can say more, he hears Soru's voice asking if he truly intends to send her away. They both turn to look at her as she repeats the question, then softly begs him to let her stay by his side. He asks her why he should listen to her when he never wanted to marry her in the first place. He says the marriage has turned him into a joke to everyone, and every time he looks at her, his anger boils over. With that, he walks away, leaving Bir-young staring after him, shocked by how furious he sounds. Soru quickly grabs Jaeyeon and says she knows he never wanted her. She tells him she doesn't expect special treatment as his wife. All she wants is to stay beside him, just a tiny space near him. She promises she won't ask for anything else. Jaeyeon calls her selfish and brings up rumors about her, including that all the servants supposedly died because of her. She tells him that he shines like the sun, that his spirit burns like fire, and that ghosts can't even stand near him, let alone touch him. She admits she knows that anyone who gets close to her ends up dying. The servant who raised her was torn apart, and people said it was an animal. But the ghost told Soru the woman died because of her. The only other person who cared for her was beheaded by ghosts, and many more people have died the same way. She tells Jaeyeon that if she stays by his side, she can live like a normal human without hurting anyone. Bir-young quietly tells Jaeyeon that they still need Soru for his revenge, and that he should just take her in. Jaeyeon refuses again, saying she's useless to him. Soru takes his injured hand, bites her lip until it bleeds, and presses his wound against it. Instantly, the injury heals. Then she tells him that her blood can heal any wound. Jaeyeon is so stunned he can't even speak. Soru explains that the ghost told her her blood is spirit water and her flesh is an elixir. Jaeyeon starts to raise his voice at her, but Bir-young cuts in first. He tells Soru that she will be very useful to Jaeyeon in the future. Then he leans in and quietly reminds Jaeyeon about his revenge. After that, Jaeyeon tells Soru she can stay at his house, but she should not expect to be treated like a wife. Soru immediately agrees and promises not to ask anything from him. As Jaeyeon walks away, she thanks him. He pauses, confused, wondering why she is so grateful when he's clearly the one using her. Meanwhile, the creatures return to their master and demand to know what the new plan is. They complain that they can't get close to Princess Soru because of that man, meaning Jaeyeon. One short, bald creature starts talking too much, and the master instantly kills him, rips out his heart, and scares the rest into silence. Then he eats the heart. Turning to the remaining creature, he tells him to wait and see. The creature bows deeply. The master adds that his hunger will never be satisfied unless it is Soru. The next day at Jaeyeon's house, people line up outside his gate, all hoping to get on his good side. Jaeyeon doesn't care. He's too busy drowning in work and complaining that his workload exploded because his lieutenant is too busy fooling around. Beryong immediately defends himself, saying he spent the entire night running around trying to build Jaeyeon's power. Jaeyeon fires back that Beryong is really doing it for his own ambition. Beryong then goes on a long rant about politics and maintaining power, most of which goes straight over Jaeyeon's head. Beryong adds that the king is probably thinking the same way. He also brings up how much public attention Jaeyeon is getting right now, though Jaeyeon knows it won't last. Beryong suggests that Jaeyeon should beg the king, which makes Jaeyeon laugh outright. Beryong then hands him a list of influential local figures they need on their side. Jaeyeon doubts any of them would follow him since he's clearly fallen out of the king's favor. Beryong explains that everyone on the list happens to have serious health problems and hints that they can use Soru's blood to heal them and make them obedient like dogs. When Jaeyeon hesitates, Beryong asks if he's developed feelings for Soru. Jaeyeon immediately denies it, saying he hasn't even looked at her face since the wedding. Beryong then tells him to make a decision. Jaeyeon doesn't like the fact that he's hesitating when Soru already said she would do anything, so he agrees to use her. Beryong immediately jumps up, ready to go spread rumors about Soru's healing powers. Before leaving, he reminds Jaeyeon to treat Soru well, warning him that if she runs away, their entire plan will fall apart. A few days later, Soru sits outside her quarters, enjoying the quiet, when her nervous maid, Yeom, arrives with a wash basin. As Yeom washes her, she asks why Soru isn't upset that the master never came to see her on her first day and has been ignoring her ever since. Soru simply calls Jaeyeon her savior, saying he took her in even though he didn't want her. When Yeom insists that Jaeyeon should treat her properly since he married her, Soru replies that this is the most respect she's ever been shown in her life. She says she has spent her life worrying that someone would die again and that it would be her fault. Then Jaeyeon appeared with his warmth and light and pulled her out of that misery. She feels like she owes him a debt she can never repay. As Soru speaks, Yeom realizes she expected someone frightening because of the rumors. Yeom promises to help Soru with anything. Soru shyly asks for some flowers because she wants to smell them, even though she feels like she's asking too much. Yeom happily promises to bring her all the flowers she can find. Meanwhile, Jaeyeon orders his servants to bring Soru to him immediately. One of his disciples has been badly injured after being kicked in the head by a horse. He didn't die right away, but he won't survive the day. Jaeyeon sees this as a chance to test whether Soru can heal serious injuries and curses himself for thinking like Beryong. When Soru arrives, supported by a servant, Jaeyeon notices she looks like a child wearing adult clothes. He takes her hand and leads her to the injured disciple, explaining why he summoned her. She feels the wound, and he asks if she can heal it. Soru admits she doesn't know. She's never healed anything this severe because no one ever came close to her. Jaeyeon starts to send her away, but she stops him, insisting she wants to try. Her eagerness makes him think she looks like someone being forced to suffer. He hands her a small knife and tells her to cut herself instead of biting her lips. Before he can explain how to do it properly, she stabs her own hand, causing a deep wound. Jaeyeon freezes in shock, then grabs her, shouting and asking what she thinks she's doing. She quietly says she wants to heal the disciple, so Jaeyeon lets her. She touches the disciple's wound with her injured hand, and Jaeyeon immediately asks if it worked. Soru isn't sure, but she notices that the disciple's breathing is steadier. Then, suddenly, Jaeyeon watches the wound completely disappear, as if it was never there. He's stunned. But then he notices her hand hasn't healed. He remembers Beryong's advice to treat her well and gently pats her head, surprising her. He tells her she did well, though he wonders if a simple head pat is enough. She shyly asks if she was helpful, and he tells her she saved someone who was about to die, which makes her beam with happiness. Later, Jaeyeon explains everything to Beryong. Beryong is over the moon and immediately suggests calling the first person on their list, the best merchant in Hiran Nation, whose daughter is seriously ill and on the brink of death. If they can win him over, it would solve their money problems. Jaeyeon notices Soru's hand is still injured, but decides to go ahead with the plan anyway. Biryong tells him to write to the merchant claiming he has an effective medicine, but to keep quiet about it being Soru's blood. That night, they wait impatiently for the merchant. Finally, he bursts in, carrying his sick daughter and apologizing for being late. He immediately offers Jaeyeon money for the medicine. Jaeyeon says the medicine isn't for sale. Biryong leans over and whispers that he should handle this better. Jaeyeon calls for Soru to be brought in. The merchant freezes when he hears her name. Moments later, Soru enters the room. Jaeyeon leads Soru to the merchant's sick daughter. The merchant immediately starts protesting, but the way Jaeyeon responds shuts him up. Soru kneels in front of the girl, and Jaeyeon asks if she can cure her. She cuts her hand and lets a drop of blood fall into the girl's mouth. The merchant lunges to push her hand away and grabs his daughter, shouting, but stops when his daughter calls out to him. His anger melts into gratitude, and he thanks Soru. She smiles at him, saying that's enough for her. Her smile annoys Jaeyeon more than it should. Biryong notices and quietly wonders why Jaeyeon is so irritated. He then leads the merchant to another room so they can discuss business while the girl rests. Soru clings to Jaeyeon's robe, asking if she was helpful. He tells her to go to her room and rest. As he walks away, she thanks him for letting her fulfill her vain wish of helping someone. Jaeyeon storms off, annoyed that she's grateful for everything. He mutters in his head, over and over, calling her a headache-inducing girl, wondering why she makes him feel so off. The next day, everyone in the Hiran Nation couldn't stop talking about the new law. Anyone caught in a gathering of more than 5 people would be arrested. Ashita, known as the best judge in the southern countries and sent to investigate the rebels, sat in a restaurant listening to people complain. He had discovered that the group of rebels who attacked the palace were actually goblins filled with wrath. He couldn't shake the feeling that his master's prophecy about a great disaster was coming true. As he ordered more alcohol, his partner Yoran bonked him on the head. She complained about him drinking instead of working, then started going over their investigation. They'd found that none of the goblins had dared go near Jaeyeon's house, all because of the man who shone as bright as the sun. Jaeyeon. Yoran asked if they still needed to protect Princess Soru, saying she didn't think the goblins would risk total annihilation. Ashita disagreed. They might, just because of Princess Soru. A loud scream cut through the chatter, drawing their attention. Someone shouted that there was a dead body. They rushed to the dock along with a crowd of onlookers. The moment Ashita saw the body, he knew it had been taken out by a very powerful goblin. Someone reminds the crowd that no group bigger than 5 can gather, so everyone starts dispersing, except Ashita and Yoran. They suspect that the goblin behind the attack is one of the same ones that hit the palace. Yoran looks confused. Goblins aren't known for sticking together, so she asks who Soru really is. Ashita explains that Soru is a celestial being, and if a goblin eats her, it will gain enormous strength. Normally, goblins eventually disappear. But if they consume a celestial being, they can be reborn as humans. Once every 1,000 years, a celestial being is born in the wrong world. And Soru is one of them. The reason she doesn't show the full power of a celestial being is probably that the goblins have stolen the divine power from her eyes. Ashita knows that if the goblins go after her, they'll go wild with greed, and any humans caught in the middle will die. It will be chaos, exactly like the prophecy of the Great Oracle. He says they have to stop it before the prophecy comes true. Suspecting that the goblins will stick close to Soru, he and Yoran decide to wait near Jaehyun's residence, Jehoga, to protect her. Days later, Soru, who falls asleep between healing people, dreams of a monstrous ghost. She asks it if it still wants to eat her. It drools and says that it does. A servant wakes her up, bringing the next sick person. The man complains about his hand, and Soru rolls up her sleeves, showing the many cuts she has made on herself to heal others. She cuts herself again, pours her blood into a cup, and gives it to the man. He drinks it and is instantly healed. He thanks her and leaves, happy. Soru wipes the blood and winces in pain, but she doesn't mind. She thinks her injuries are nothing compared to the ones she healed. Just being able to help Jaeyeon is enough to make her happy. She's happy even if he doesn't come to see her, or if her wounds don't get better. When she falls asleep again, the master goblin arrives. He is drawn by the scent of her blood. He leans down to bite her, but is stopped by something he can't explain. He leaves, promising to come back. King Garyun invites Jaehyun to the palace to ask about all the people visiting his home. Jaehyun just shrugs and says it's not a bad thing to have some social activity, which makes Garyun laugh. He comments that Jaehyun has matured since getting married, while Jaehyun struggles to keep his anger in check. Garyun then says he wants to appoint Jaehyun as commander of the force in charge of catching the rebel group. Jaehyun politely declines, saying he doesn't know how to investigate. Garyun presses, asking if there's some other reason he doesn't want to help. Jaehyun knows the king is trying to trap him, but he isn't scared. He asks why he should help and says Garyun should have asked if he has any reason to cooperate. Garyun gets furious and throws a cup at Jaehyun's head. Jaehyun starts bleeding but keeps talking, making the king even angrier. He turns and walks away, while the king keeps shouting after him. As Jaehyun leaves, he thinks that the king can try to take him down, but unlike old times, he won't just lie down and take it. He has powerful men by his side now, people he healed, so the king can't touch him without giving a proper reason. He vows to make King Garyun pay for everything he's suffered. Suddenly, Princess Garen calls out to him. As she walks closer, he can't help but remember the first time he saw her. She reaches out to touch his injury, but he slaps her hand away and tells her that her sympathy, or guilt, isn't welcome. With that, he walks off, while Garen's maid shouts after him about his rude behavior. When he turns the corner, Beryong is waiting. He asks if Garen isn't the woman Jaehyun has been longing for. Jaehyun replies that he has no intention of falling for flattery. Beryong says Jaehyun doesn't actually have affection for Garan. He just wants to win her. Jaehyun snaps back that he was ready to sacrifice his life for her. If that isn't affection, then what is? Beryong then points to his head, and Jaehyun explains what happened with the king. Beryong says it's a relief that Soru can heal him. Jaehyun thinks of the last time he saw Soru and says he won't ask her for help. He knows she would cut herself without hesitation and do it with a grateful smile. Just thinking about it makes his anger flare up again. Some nights later, a young girl sneaks out of her home to meet a nobleman waiting for her. Every night, he comes out and drinks in silence. He's stolen her heart with just his presence. She had asked him to meet her at the willow tree around midnight to tell him something, and he agreed. To her, he is definitely not human. His most captivating feature is his soul-sucking eyes. When she reaches the tree and sees the nobleman, who is actually the master goblin, she hugs him tightly, telling him how much she's longed for him. He asks if longing means she loves him, and when she says yes, he tells her to kiss him. She does, hoping to melt his cold heart. But the master goblin says nothing has changed. He rips out her heart and eats it. Still, it isn't enough to quench his anger. He wants more and more. In the morning, a crowd gathers around the girl's body, complaining that this has been happening too often. Ashita notices that her heart is missing, just like the other victims. Yuran arrives after searching for clues, but finds nothing, except that it's the same person responsible for the recent deaths. She asks Ashita to use his magic to read the memories of the place, but he can't because the thoughts of all the people around are too chaotic. They have to wait. She comments that they need to figure out the goblin's purpose before looking for more clues. Ashita notes that all the victims have missing hearts, and then he realizes the truth. The goblin is trying to become human. A goblin can become human by eating a celestial being, but it can also do so by consuming 1,000 human hearts. Yuran says that goblins will become weak once they turn human, while Ashita notes that goblins are instinctively obsessed with humans. Yuran leaves to tell the other judges to speed up the search. Ashita thinks he's faced plenty of goblins before, but this is the first time he feels a real sense of danger. He knows this one won't be easy. Meanwhile, Jaehyun goes to Kiru to meet someone Beryong says is eager to see him. He thinks that if they truly wanted to meet, they could have just come to his house. When he sees the person, he's shocked. It's Hanbi. Hanbi is the most influential figure in the royal court. He's always treated Jaehyun like a thorn in his side, and on top of that, he's King Garyun's closest man. Jaehyun refuses Hanbi's offer to sit, saying they're not close enough and telling him to get straight to the point. Hanbi says he needs Jaehyun's help. Jaehyun suspects Hanbi is up to something, but he sits anyway. Hanbi tells him that he's heard a lot of people have been going to Jaehyun's house, which makes Jaehyun think the king sent him to find out what's going on. Hanbi goes on to explain that the people visiting Jaehyun are sick or have sick family members, including his close friend Nam Taehu, whose feet were so rotten that even the best doctors couldn't fix them. Now, they're perfectly healed. Hanbi asks Jaehyun if there's something in his house that can cure incurable diseases. Jaehyun pretends not to know what he's talking about. Then Hanbi takes off his shirt, revealing the rotten flesh beneath, shocking Jaehyun. He mutters that Hanbi hid his disease well. Hanbi says that if anyone finds out, he'll be known as a walking corpse instead of a political figure. His condition recently worsened, and he thought about retiring. But then he saw Nam Taehu healed. He begged Nam Taehu to tell him what he did, and Nam Taehu reluctantly said to ask Jaehyun for help. Jaehyun laughs, but Hanbi insists he's desperate, bowing to him and begging to be saved. Jaehyun still doesn't fully trust him. Hanbi then brings out a scroll as proof, giving it to Jaehyun. The scroll contains a list of everyone who has asked Hanbi for favors, a list that could cost him his life. Jaehyun thinks that if it were up to him, he'd just let Hanbi die. Instead, he takes the scroll and tells Hanbi to come to his house within a day. On the way back, he tells Biryong what happened with Humbi. Biryong gets excited, saying it won't be long before King Garyon is reduced to a figurehead. Their conversation shifts to how badly the king treats Jayon. Even when Jayon tries to lie low, the king is on edge. Biryong asks if he isn't glad he listened and married Soru, but before Jayon can answer, someone shouts, pointing out a new dead body in an alley. Jayon and Biryong look at the mutilated corpse and wonder how a body that belongs on a battlefield ends up in town. Jayon asks a man what happened. The man says thieves have been taking the victims' hearts. Jayon has a hard time believing thieves would do something so brutal. He instructs the man to find the victim's family and help them retrieve the body. That night, Yom cries beside a clearly exhausted Soru, noticing all the cuts on her body. She begs Soru to tell Jayon to let her rest. Soru remembers the time Jayon patted her head and tells Yom she can't ask him to let her rest, thanking her for worrying. Yom pleads some more until Soru finally sends her to bed. After Yom leaves, Soru thinks about someone out there who worries and cries for her. She hears her door open and assumes it's Yom, but it isn't. Soru becomes scared when she realizes it isn't Yom, and the footsteps show it's more than one person. She asks who's there, and one of them speaks. Relief washes over her when she recognizes them as the servants. They beg her to save their mother's life. Soru tells them to bring their mother the next day. They refuse, saying they have no power or money, so the master won't allow it. She offers her blood, but they refuse, warning it will coagulate. One of them pulls out a small knife and they start tearing at her. Soru lies there, tears rolling down her cheeks, unable to fight back. She tells herself they are good people, only trying to save their mother. Over and over, she repeats in her head that she's fine. When they finish, they stitch her up a little and leave. The next morning, an exhausted Soru waits for a new group of patients to arrive for healing. She thinks this is what she begged Jayon for. This is where she wanted to stay. And then wonders if she really wants it. Just then, Yom, who is supposed to be working, comes in with a bouquet of flowers so Soru can smell them. She promises to bring flowers every morning, then leaves when someone calls her name. Soru breathes in the scent of the flowers and starts crying, thinking that even though things are scary and painful, it's okay. She's in the light for a little while, and she knows she can handle anything. After that day, the servants started visiting Soru every night. Their numbers grow and they stop apologizing. Some squeeze blood out of her, others cut her flesh and take it away. They even chat casually while cutting her. Every morning, they serve her tea mixed with opium and replace her scented candles with ones filled with painkillers. All day long, Soru lies in bed, awake but dizzy, her vision blurred. She wonders if this is her punishment for all the people who died because of her. One morning, Yom brings Soru a bouquet of flowers like she always does, and immediately notices that something is wrong. She checks Soru's wounds and sees they aren't healing, then suggests she see a doctor. Soru refuses, saying she just hasn't been sleeping well and that the wind was too strong. Yom frowns. There hasn't been any wind at all. Soru quickly changes the topic to flowers, and Yom falls for it. She walks off to put the flowers in a vase, still chatting, when Soru suddenly collapses. Yom rushes back, shaking her and crying for her to wake up. That's when she sees the blood and starts screaming for help. Meanwhile, Soru feels her body growing colder and colder. She wonders if this is how she dies. She always thought death would be lonely and terrifying, but instead, she feels calm. She's okay with dying if it means the pain will finally stop. She sees the monstrous ghosts that used to torment her surrounding her again. They're excited. Now they can finally eat her. She thinks that being with Jayon would change things, but no matter what she does, her sins never disappear. She calls herself childish and offers herself to them. She tells the ghosts to tear her apart and says it's fine if her useless life can fill their stomachs. Just as they move toward her, the Goblin Master appears and uses his magic to drive the ghosts away. He tells her she can't go. He says things she can't fully hear and insists she has to stay with him. She wonders who he is and why his voice always sounds so sad. When she wakes up in the real world, Jayon is sitting beside her, letting out a breath of relief. A few hours earlier, Jayon was at the palace in a meeting with the king and the council. The king tells them he has received complaints that barbarians near the new border are running wild. He says he's considering assigning Jayon to organize a subjugation team and send them there. Humbi steps forward and says it hasn't been long since the war ended. He reminds the king of everything that's been happening in town lately. He adds that if Jayon is sent far away now, the people won't feel safe. One by one, almost all the council members beg the king to reconsider, leaving Garyun completely stunned. For a moment, he can't even form a proper sentence. In the end, he agrees not to send Jayon away. On the way home, Jayon feels satisfied that he listened to Biryong. He never expected gathering allies to be this effective. He thinks that if enough people are on their side, their opinions will carry weight, And then he can push Garyon aside and become Grand General. Once that happens, no one will be able to mess with him. When he arrives home, he sees Yom demanding to speak with him, but a servant blocks her. Jaeyeon recognizes her as Soru's maid and asks what's happening. The man holding her says it's nothing, that Yom is just making a fuss. Jaeyeon slaps the man's hands away from her and Yom bows, ready to explain. The man tries again to stop her, but Jaeyeon tells him to back off. Yom bravely asks Jaeyeon to let Soru rest for a few days. She says it's too much for her. Jaeyeon assumes Soru must have sent her, but Yom explains that Soru keeps asking. And she, Yom, couldn't stand it any longer, so she came on her own. She asks how he could order Soru to be cut while she's still unconscious, and if he has no pity for her. She describes all the cuts on Soru's body and adds that Soru hasn't regained consciousness the entire day. Jaeyeon is shocked. He hasn't heard anything about it. Yom is equally surprised he didn't know, saying she sent some servants to report it. The man lies, claiming he didn't hear a thing. Jaeyeon asks Yom if she's saying that Soru has been receiving visitors even while unconscious. Yom tells him that it's the servants who have been cutting her, and that makes Jaeyeon furious. He storms to the outer building where Soru has been staying. When he arrives, the servants try to stop him from seeing her, but they fail. He enters her room, and the smell of anesthesia hits him first. He freezes, shocked at Soru's condition. His hand shakes as he reaches for her, wondering why he didn't know she had gotten this bad and how she's been treated. He carefully carries her out of the room and demands to know why no one informed him. Then he says he will investigate thoroughly later. He carries her all the way to his quarters, surprised at how light she feels, almost like she isn't even human. He immediately orders a doctor to be called. While waiting, he wonders why he feels this way about a woman he didn't even want in the first place. When the doctor arrives and checks Soru, he calls Jaeyeon over to see her wounds for himself. He grimaces and says it looks like she's been cutting herself with dirty knives, and the infection is severe. He explains that Soru's body has become addicted to the medicine she's been given, which is why her wounds aren't healing. He adds that the medicine was opium and asks how she ended up with so much of it. Jaeyeon realizes it was the smell he noticed when he first entered her room. The servants have been giving it to her. The doctor says he'll detoxify Soru and treat her wounds, but she will heal very slowly, and some side effects will stay with her for the rest of her life. Jaeyeon leaves the room, furious, and orders all the servants in the outbuilding to be flogged. He sits, seething, as the servants are flogged, ignoring their desperate pleas to stop. Bir-young arrives, wanting to know what's happening. Jaeyeon tells him that the servants formed a group and were cutting Soru's flesh and selling it, which shocks Bir-young. He can't even fathom how anyone could do that. Jaeyeon adds that it's because Soru was seen as livestock, an animal he was rearing at home, and they didn't consider that she's his wife, or even human. He blames himself for how the servants treated her, thinking about how he kept her in that shabby corner of the house, drawing her blood every day. He remembers that on their wedding day, Soru said she wanted to live like a normal human. Bir-young tells him not to blame himself, but Jaeyeon shouts, furious, that he never gave the servants permission to cut her. Only people with money and power should have that right. He grabs Bir-young by the shirt and says he isn't a hypocrite like him. He adds that he's furious with anyone who dares to touch what's his without fear. He says he's going to track down everyone who had a hand in it and punish them. Bir-young volunteers to punish the servants himself, reasoning that there will be rumors about the lord of the house treating his servants harshly. Jaeyeon tells him that it doesn't matter. Bir-young insists, saying punishing them will let him avoid feeling guilty about Soru. Somehow, he convinces Jaeyeon to let him handle it. Jaeyeon sits beside Soru, thinking she doesn't deserve any of this. She was just used by Garyon to insult him. And even though he knew it, he took his anger out on her. Then he notices her hand move. And that brings them to the present. She looks around and asks where she is. He tells her she's in his room and explains everything, including that Yom informed him. He asks why she didn't ask for help or tell him what was happening. She says she didn't know she could, then admits she sees now that if she had asked, he would have helped her. He starts to raise his voice at her, but stops, remembering how many times he's already shouted at her. He then tells her he'll compensate her for everything she's gone through, and asks her to tell him what she wants. In his head, he laughs at himself, and trying to fix his guilt with compensation, just like Bir-young. She sits up, asking if he'll really give her anything. He says he will, as long as it's within his power. She wants to touch him because she can't see him with her eyes. Touching him is the only way she can see him. Panic rises in her chest, and she quickly tells him that he can say no. An awkward silence settles between them as Jaeyeon tries to understand her request. After everything she has suffered, her wish is simply to touch him. He wonders if she's testing him, or if she believes his promise is empty. He tells her that she was hurt because he failed to control his servants, and he has no intention of denying that responsibility. She should ask for anything at all until his anger subsides. He offers money. He even offers an apology while kneeling. She refuses. She says no one asks the sun for a reward because the sun already gives enough just by existing. She tells him she can rest just by being next to him and that he has always been kind to her. Her words confuse him. They anger him even more. Still, he stands and gently places her hand against his face. She traces his features slowly, then says she thought his face would feel rougher. He snaps back that his face is rough, and she laughs softly. He tells her to ask for something better. When she tries to argue, he raises his voice, cutting her off. So she asks him to visit her sometimes, wherever she stays, just once in a while. He calls her a foolish woman in his mind and tells her she'll be staying in his room until she recovers, so she should already be satisfied. When she starts to thank him, he stops her immediately and tells her not to give him her gratitude. Meanwhile, one of Jaehyun's servants escapes with a portion of Soru's flesh. She plans to sell it for a large sum, become rich, and flee to a southern country where no one will ever find her. Before she can go far, the master goblin appears before her and demands that she hand over Soru's flesh. When she tries to refuse, he grabs her by the throat. He tells her that this is not something she can touch so recklessly. He rips out her heart and says that anyone who dares touch what doesn't belong to them must pay the price. Some nights later, the king hears that fewer people are visiting Jehoga. Garyun demands to know exactly what's happening there and calls his assistant incompetent. The assistant admits he hasn't been able to get much information because affairs at Jehoga are tightly monitored, but he does report one thing. Since Jaehyun isn't receiving visitors, the nobles are angry. He explains that Jaehyun has a wonder drug capable of healing a dying person instantly. He adds that since Jaehyun only recently got this drug, it must have come from the spoils of war, snuck out without permission. Garyun's anger boils over. Jaehyun stole what was meant for the king. The assistant urges him to arrest Jaehyun, but Garyun hesitates. He can only interrogate him because so many nobles support Jaehyun. He suspects they might be planning to form a group of traitorous rebels. The assistant suggests a clever plan. Spread rumors that Jaehyun's wonder drug is only for the rich, that he doesn't care about ordinary people. It would ruin his reputation as a hero. Garyun likes the idea. He's hated Jaehyun since the first time he saw him and always felt he'd be a problem. Now he vows to root him out completely. Days later, the rumors spread everywhere. Biryong tries to convince Jaehyun to let Soru start healing people again, but Jaehyun refuses. Soru's wounds have healed, but the doctor says her body is still weak and she shouldn't strain herself. Jaehyun says it's far too soon for her to be using a knife again. A frustrated Biryong snaps that if Jaehyun keeps refusing visitors, he'll only earn unnecessary enemies. He points out what's happening right now. People are banging on the gate, demanding to be let in, even commoners. Biryong adds that Jaehyun's reputation has already taken a hit since several servants were dismissed. Jaehyun still refuses, confident that he has allies like Hanbi and other nobles backing him. Biryong warns him that those nobles might stand by him for now. But once public opinion shifts, everything will fall apart again. In the worst case, their secret will be exposed, Soru will be taken away, and Jaehyun will be exiled for harming the royal family. He reminds Jaehyun that it's his duty to protect his household and asks if he really wants to give up after coming this far, just because of pity. Jaehyun thinks about his family and how people mocked him, calling him a child from a ruined house. Then he thinks about Soru. Finally, he tells Biryong that if his household will fall apart just because he refuses to use a sickly woman, then so be it. Jaehyun ends the conversation and starts walking away, saying he'll talk to Hanbi. Biryong calls after him, asking if he feels something for Soru. Jaehyun snaps that he doesn't need help from that sickly woman anymore. He can handle things himself now. Biryong should stop whining and start thinking of other solutions. He adds that it's Biryong who likes Soru, since he talks about her all the time. Biryong thinks Jaehyun has changed. In the past, he would have backed off from the most efficient method, but now, he doesn't like the feeling of the situation at all. Jaehyun finds Soru in the garden alone, smelling flowers. He shouts at her for being outside by herself, especially after what happened, and with people possibly still after her. When she says she's sorry, he helps her stand and tells her he'll send Yum to her, but she must not go outside. Then he starts to leave, mentioning he has an appointment and that he'll visit her if she stays in her room. She eagerly agrees to stay inside and tells him to come back safely. He wonders why she's so happy. Shouldn't she be upset with him or blaming him? Every time she acts like this, it feels like his heart is being torn to pieces. Meanwhile, the master goblin, who just finished eating the heart of the servants who cut Soru, feels strange. An old goblin drags in the last servant, begging for his life. The master goblin takes his heart anyway, saying this is what anger feels like. Really, truly angry. He recalls Soru offering herself to the ghosts and wonders why she didn't get angry. The old goblin suggests that maybe she's just foolish, or maybe she's in a situation where she can't afford to get angry. The master goblin remembers seeing Soru with Jaeyeon and realizes Jaeyeon is the reason. Days later, Soru is so lost in thought that she doesn't hear Yom calling her. When Yom asks if she's thinking about something in particular, Soru says she was just enjoying the way flowers smell. Just then, Jaeyeon enters and asks if she's had dinner. When she says she doesn't have an appetite, he starts to get angry, assuming she must be uncomfortable. Yom boldly says that Soru feels stuffy and needs fresh air. Soru frantically assures Jaeyeon she's fine, but he tells her to get dressed. He wants to take her for a walk. Later, she meets him outside the gate. He offers her his sleeve so she can hold on to him and says he heard the night market just opened. He asks if there's anything she wants to eat. She hesitates, then remembers flour taffy, the sweet treat her nanny used to secretly give her when she was little. She would savor it slowly, happy that someone cared enough to buy it. Jaeyeon agrees to get it for her. In her excitement, Soru trips and falls. Jaeyeon freezes for a moment. The memory of her on the floor on their wedding day flashes through his mind. She starts to apologize, but he stops her, helps her with her shoe, then holds her hand and leads her through the market. She thinks he's being kind out of guilt, but reminds herself she doesn't need it. She's the one who said she doesn't care what treatment she gets. She's so lost in thought that she only notices later how crowded the night market is. Jaeyeon, too, is surprised that the market is still bustling, despite all the recent incidents. Soru hears the sound of instruments from somewhere and asks if someone is singing. Jaeyeon leads her toward the music. People notice him immediately, and it doesn't take long for them to realize the girl with him is his wife, the ghost princess who leaves curses wherever she goes. They ask if it will be dangerous with her here. The deeper they go into the market, the louder and more crowded it gets. It has been a long time since the festival was last held, so everything is bigger and more chaotic than usual. Jaeyeon wonders if he should really be walking around like this when there still hasn't been a proper investigation into the deaths. Soru thanks him for bringing her to a place like this, since she has never been there before, and he complains about her saying thank you all the time. He spots a man making flour taffy and pretty much drags her over. He buys a lot of it and hands it to her. When she comments on how much he bought, he says that if she eats it until she's tired of it, she won't ask him to buy it again. She starts to thank him, but he quickly shoves one into her mouth before she can finish. As she eats, he thinks she kind of looks like a squirrel. After that, they start heading back when Jaeyeon notices a man selling hairpins. He looks at Soru, thinking she dresses like a little kid. He takes her to a corner and tells her to wait while he goes to buy something. She asks if she can come with him, but he refuses, saying she'll get tired in the crowd. After he leaves, Soru spends the next few minutes trying to convince herself that Jaeyeon isn't abandoning her, and that he'll come back. At first, just being by his side felt like a blessing. But now, every time he looks at her or takes care of her, she finds herself wanting more. Someone throws a rock that hits her on the head, and she falls to the ground. The man who threw it accuses her of trying to bring all her ghosts down on them, and his partners shout that she should leave. She tries to explain that she would never do that, but they don't listen. Instead, the men start telling the crowd forming around them that Soru is the ghost princess. They question why she is there and ask if she came to take someone's life. They even suggest killing Soru to put an end to all their bad luck. The man lifts another rock and says they should stone her to death. Suddenly, the master goblin grabs his hand. Soru can tell right away that the newcomer carries the energy of a monster. The people start questioning the goblin about who he is, and he slowly begins to change into his true form. Soru stops him. She begs him not to hurt the people and asks him to take her instead, making him stare at her in shock. In the deepest part of the depths lives a monster born with an endless hunger. He survives by eating everything around him. One day, sunlight from beyond the valley reaches him and seems to call his name. He suddenly becomes curious about what exists outside the valley, so for the first time, he climbs up. There, he sees humans and can't understand why they don't eat each other. His curiosity grows, and he shows himself to them. The humans panic and attack him, and he fights back. The master goblin tells Soru that they attacked her first. She recognizes his voice but can't remember where she heard it before. He asks why she is protecting them when they are the ones who hurt her. Someone throws a rock at him and shouts, asking if he's on her side. Soru tells him they aren't bad people, just scared for their safety, and that everything will be fine if she disappears. At that moment, Jaeyeon returns and freezes when he sees Soru bleeding. She runs to him, thinking that now that he's here, the monster will go away. Jaeyeon angrily grabs the master goblin, assuming he's the one who hurt Soru. The master goblin doesn't have much strength right now, but he's sure he can handle one man. He thinks Jaeyeon is the one who has hurt Soru the most. He raises his claws to attack, but Soru hugs Jaeyeon and begs the Master Goblin not to hurt him. Jaeyeon doesn't understand what she's saying, but he notices her injuries are worse than they look. He picks her up and starts walking away. Before leaving, he tells the Master Goblin that he will make him pay for what he did to Soru. The people call Jaeyeon arrogant for bringing Soru there. Then they turn to the Master Goblin and ask why he likes such a gloomy girl. They make lewd comments about Soru and laugh. The Master Goblin wonders why Soru never got angry. Finally, unable to take it anymore, he rips one of their hearts out. Everyone screams and runs. He tells himself that if he wants to understand why Soru didn't get angry, he will have to become human. The doctor manages to stop the bleeding because the treatment comes early. He tells Jaeyeon that Soru needs to be careful not to reopen the wound. After the doctor leaves, Soru starts worrying that Jaeyeon will see her as a burden, that he'll think she's too much trouble to keep around. And she's scared he might send her far away. Instead, Jaeyeon apologizes for leaving her alone at the market. He stops mid-apology when she suddenly starts crying and assumes it's because she's in pain. Soru thinks it isn't his fault at all, that this is just her punishment, and that she should ask him to send her away. She tells him she isn't in pain. He tucks her into bed. Just as she's about to fall asleep, she tells him the flower taffy fell, and she left it behind, then apologizes. Clearly annoyed, he says he'll just buy her another one. As he leaves the room, he remembers the hairpins he bought and decides he'll give them to her next time. At dawn, Ashita stands in front of the tree where they found the girl's body, thinking about how many bodies they've already discovered and how many people are still missing. He wonders if the culprit plans to keep hunting in the city. Yoren arrives and asks if he has read the culprit's thoughts and tracked them down. Ashita says he can't sense their energy, which makes Yoren angry. He quickly adds that he found out the culprit is only one person, surprising Yoren since the victims' bodies have several marks. Ashita then tells her that more than 100 goblins are working together with the culprit. Yoren asks Ashita if he's mistaken, because there's no way he wouldn't sense the energy of someone who can summon that many goblins. Ashita says he's sure. The victims' bodies are clean. There are marks on their wrists and shoulders, but the only thing missing is the heart. Normally, goblins would fight each other over food, but this time they didn't. That means someone is stopping them from acting on instinct, and that someone is their leader. Yoren asks how they're supposed to catch the boss, and Ashita complains again that he still can't sense his energy. But just then, a man comes running toward them, shouting. He says everyone who went to the night market the night before has been found dead. Ashita rushes to the market. When he arrives, he sees bodies scattered everywhere. The sight makes him furious. He swears he will find the Master Goblin and end his life. News about the bodies in the market spreads through the whole town. It's all anyone talks about. Beryong overhears a group discussing it and wonders if they're dealing with a serial killer. Part of him hopes they'll blame the royal family. That hope dies quickly when someone says it's because of the ghost princess, and that the murders only started after she left the palace. The man adds that he's sure the royal and Jehoga families are ignoring the situation because they're working together. Beryong steps in and says, "There's no proof it's the princess's fault. If it were, the people in Jehoga would have died first." The man fires back that workers from Jehoga have died and insists Soru is cursing them. Beryong reminds him that Jehoga recently saved people by curing their illnesses. The man argues that the cure was only for the rich. Beryong thinks that if they had healed a few regular people, public opinion might have changed, but Jaeyeon refused. Tired of defending him, Beryong walks away. As he turns a corner, he almost bumps into the Master Goblin, who looks strangely familiar. He calls the Master Goblin and starts following him. The goblin turns into an alley. When Beryong reaches it, there's no sign of him. He gives up and heads back. Meanwhile, the Master Goblin watches Beryong from another alley. The old goblin asks if they should kill Beryong since they saw him with Jaeyeon. The Master Goblin says no, staring at Soru's flower taffy in his hand. The old goblin reminds him that he ordered them to assassinate everyone connected to the Jehoga household, but the Master Goblin says nothing. The old goblin then tells the eyeless goblin to bring 50 hearts by tonight. The eyeless goblin complains that it will be difficult because of the judges. The old goblin asks if he plans to disobey the Master Goblin. The no-eyes goblin trembles and quickly says no. While they keep talking, the Master Goblin simply walks away. The old goblin calls after him but gets no response. He mutters that the Master Goblin is getting harder to please and that they need to figure out what he's thinking if they want to satisfy him. As the Master Goblin walks down the street, women admire him, but he doesn't notice. All he can think about is the moment Soru hugged Jaeyeon. He remembers the look on her face and realizes he has never seen that expression before. He wonders if she loves Jaeyeon while watching her lean out her window to smell the flowers. Then he questions himself. If he eats her heart now, will it finally end this awful question? The drunk man staggers home when the eyeless goblin suddenly grabs him. Before the goblin can do anything, Ashita turns into a crow, and the drunk man runs off screaming about a monster. Ashita grabs the eyeless goblin, and Yoren says they should squeeze information out of him. The eyeless goblin boldly says he won't talk, but when Ashita pulls out a charm and threatens to grill him, he immediately says he'll tell him everything. Ashita asks who his boss is, but the eyeless goblin stays quiet, so Ashita brings the charm closer. The goblin shouts that it's not like he doesn't want to tell him. He explains that the master goblin took his name, so he can't do anything the master goblin forbids. A goblin's name is buried deep in their soul, and anyone who learns it can control them, which is why goblins never give their names willingly. But one day, the master goblin appeared out of nowhere and somehow already knew all their names. He made them kneel and ordered them to bring him human hearts, and they couldn't disobey. Ashita asks what they call the master goblin, and the eyeless goblin answers, Yato. Meanwhile, Yato appears in Soru's dream. She's lying in water when she asks if he came to take her life. When he says yes, she calmly accepts it. He reaches out to her but suddenly stops and asks if the owner of the house she's staying in was the one who tortured her. He says Jaeyeon locked her up and took her flesh, and wonders why she protects him instead of being angry. Soru starts to wonder if Yato was the monster in the marketplace. She then tells him that Jaeyeon is her savior and that he treats her kindly, even though she's no longer useful to him. Yato can't believe what he's hearing. He calls humans selfish and says that no matter how kind they seem, they always return to their selfish nature. He adds that a normal human would have run the moment their flesh was cut, but Soru didn't. Then he asks if she loves Jaeyeon, leaving her confused about what he's even talking about. Soru doesn't think it's possible for her to be in love with Jaeyeon. She thinks about him and says she only wants him to be happy. That isn't love. How dare she even think of loving him? Yato tells her that she already knows how to love. He goes on about how humans love and tells Soru plainly that she is in love with Jaeyeon. He says that because she loves him, she didn't get angry at him, and that's something he can't understand as a goblin. He declares that he hates Jaeyeon and wants to tear him apart. She begs him not to. She feels like she has met Yato a very long time ago and starts wondering where she might have seen him before. Jaeyeon wakes her up, asking if she had a nightmare. She says she did. He complains about her not sleeping well at night, and she tells him this time was an exception, that she usually sleeps fine. He clearly doesn't believe her. Jaeyeon decides to stay and wait until she falls asleep again. She closes her eyes, but all she can think about is the look on Yato's face when he said she was in love with Jaeyeon. Then she starts wondering if she really is in love with him. He is her savior. Having feelings like that for him feels like a sin. Her heart feels restless and frustrated. The next day, Jaeyeon returns home furious. Earlier, he had a meeting with Hanbi about making him the Grand General. Hanbi said they couldn't bring it up right now because of what happened at the marketplace. Jaeyeon replied that he knew the timing was bad, but dragging it out would only put him at a disadvantage. Hanbi then caught him off guard by asking whether Soru had recovered and whether they could even make a small profit from her. Back in the present, Jaeyeon slams his fist into the wall, thinking he needs to become the Grand General as soon as possible to escape all this troublesome work. He remembers Biryong telling him to use Soru and starts to consider it. Then he thinks of Soru and gets angry at himself, hitting the wall so hard that his hand bleeds. He tells himself he can do things on his own, with his own strength, without using her. Just then, a servant runs in, shouting that there's trouble. He tells Jaeyeon that Soru has disappeared. Jaeyeon joins the servants as they search everywhere for Soru. He immediately thinks the servants who hurt her before must have kidnapped her and locked her up somewhere. The thought makes his chest tighten. Just then, he hears Soru calling his name. He turns and sees her lying on the ground, half hidden in the bushes and not properly dressed. A servant runs up to him and asks if he's found Soru. Jaeyeon says yes and tells him to leave. The servant insists he needs to take Soru back, and Jaeyeon snaps at him so sharply that the servant runs off. Jaeyeon takes off his coat and wraps it around Soru, raising his voice as he asks what she's doing there and why she's dressed like that. She explains that she only came out for a short walk, but when she sensed people nearby, she got scared and hid. While hiding, her hair got tangled in the bushes. Jaeyeon tells her she should have called someone, then realizes she probably doesn't trust anyone after what his servants did to her. He gently puts his hands around her and starts untangling her hair. That makes her blush. He carefully tucks her hair behind her ear and notices her face turning red. He immediately shouts, asking why she's blushing. She covers her face and tells him not to look at her, saying she must look ugly. He tells her she doesn't look ugly. He thinks she looks like a ceramic doll. Her eyes especially catch his attention. They look like the moon, or a still lake with a strange color. He wonders what her eyes looked like before the monster stole them. When she softly calls his name, he suddenly stands up and tells her to get up, a bit too loudly. He tells himself his heart only fluttered because he feels sorry for her. She's small and helpless, so of course he worries. And of course he feels guilty that she's stuck with someone like him as a husband. That's all it is. Meanwhile, Ashita lies in his room, thinking about how there haven't been any dead bodies lately. He wonders if Yato has moved to another city, though he doesn't really believe Yato would give up on Soru so easily. According to the eyeless goblin, Yato has already eaten about 700 hearts, which means he still needs 300 more. The eyeless goblin, locked in a cage, begs Ashita to let him go. Ashita refuses, and the goblin promises he won't attack humans again. Ashita still says no, reminding him that he can't disobey Yato's orders. The goblin suggests he could just run away and never come back. Ashita refuses again, saying he has no intention of letting him go. Then the goblin offers a tempting deal. He promises to give Ashita all of his treasures if he ever breaks his promise. That catches Ashita's attention. The goblin explains that he has mountains of jewels and gold hidden in his cave and promises to hand it all over if Ashita lets him go. Just as Ashita reaches for the charm on the cage, Yoran arrives in time and kicks him back. Ashita lies, saying he was only bringing out the eyeless goblin to beat him up, but Yoran doesn't buy it. She expresses her disappointment and threatens to end the goblin's life. The goblin begs for mercy, and Ashita also pleads with her, pointing out that without him, they wouldn't have any clue about Yato. Reluctantly, she lets the goblin go and throws a wooden box at Ashita. No Eyes sniffs it and comments that it smells amazing, but Ashita can't smell anything. The scent can only be perceived by goblins and monsters. When Yoran asks what's inside, the goblin says it's the ghost princess's flesh. He also explains that Soru's blood has healing powers, and that she is the cure within Jehoga. Yoran fills Ashita in on how Soru cuts herself to heal people while the servants do the cutting. She even tracked down one of the servants who had been kicked out, threatened him with the goblin, and got the full story along with the box. Ashita is shocked that such things happened, and that there are no rumors about it. Yoran says Jehoga covered it up thoroughly, probably not proud that a man they called a hero made money by selling his wife's raw flesh. Ashita asks the goblin if Yato went after the people who were kicked out of Jehoga, and why he'd need more than just a little flesh. No Eyes doesn't know, because even he doesn't understand Yato's intentions. Ashita concludes that Yato must still be in the city. He still needs Soru. Yoran asks if they can use the flesh in the box to lure Yato out, but Ashita doubts he'll fall for it. Still, he starts thinking about using a bigger bait to draw Yato out. At Jehoga, Biryong bursts into Jaeyeon's office, shouting that there's trouble. Rumors are spreading that Soru is behind the recent murders in the city, and people are heading to the palace to petition the king to move Jehoga outside the city walls. Biryong warns Jaeyeon that he's in danger because of Soru, and reminds him that he said if she wasn't healing the sick, she should be sent far away from the city. Jaeyeon asks how he could send her away when there are people out there who would steal her blood. Biryong yells at him, reminding him that he planned to send Soru away after the wedding. But Jaeyeon still refuses, insisting it's his fault she's in this situation. A servant announces that the judges are there to see Jaeyeon. They claim to know Soru's secret and threaten to expose it if he doesn't meet them. Jaeyeon's anger flares, but he agrees to see them. When Ashita and Yoran arrive, Ashita explains that bringing the judges was the only way to guarantee Jaeyeon would meet them. Then, without any preamble, he tells Jaeyeon that they would like to borrow his wife for a little while. He adds that he wants to borrow Soru's power. Jaeyeon instantly gets furious, but Biryong quickly calms him down and asks Ashita who he is. Ashita introduces himself and Yoran as judges from the south, sent to hunt monsters that threaten the people of this country. He explains that the recent murders were done by a monster, and to stop it, they need Soru's power. Jaeyeon laughs, clearly not convinced that a monster is running around stealing people's hearts. Ashita asks if it wouldn't be even more absurd to believe humans did it. He points out that even bandits wouldn't be able to kill 100 people in one night without anyone noticing. Biryong, still doubtful, asks why they need Soru's power. Ashita explains that the monster needs 1,000 human hearts to become human. It's currently disguised as one, which makes it hard to track. He places the wooden box with Soru's flesh on the table and says the one thing the people who died at the market had in common was that they were fired from Jehoga. He adds that Soru's flesh is like a delicacy monsters can't resist. That instinct is the only weakness the monster has. Biryong asks if they want more of Soru's flesh. When they say no, Jaeyeon immediately realizes they plan to use Soru herself as bait. Before anyone else can speak, Jaeyeon flatly refuses. Ashita raises his voice, saying hundreds of people will die, and asks if Jaeyeon plans to sit back and watch when he's known as the nation's hero. Jaeyeon shoots back, asking why he should trust suspicious strangers. Ashita says he can prove his and Yoran's identities and even assign elite guards to protect Soru. Jaeyeon replies that if they were truly that capable, they wouldn't need bait at all. He refuses to hand Soru over based on what he calls empty promises. Yoran, who has been quiet the whole time, finally speaks. She reminds Jaeyeon that he was the one who first started cutting Soru. Then she states that their magic skills are unmatched and that the 50 best judges will fight to defeat the monster. When Jaeyeon still refuses, Bir-young steps in and points out that this could solve all their problems. It could help Jaeyeon become a grand general without hurting Soru. Jaeyeon remembers Hanbi suggesting they profit from Soru, the crowds knocking at his gate for her healing blood, and his recent talk with Bir-young. After a long pause, he says he will discuss it with Soru, and that this will be the last time he ever uses her power. Meanwhile, Yeom checks Soru's injuries and notices they are almost completely healed. Even the scars are fading. Soru quietly says she'll at least be free from her horrible appearance for a while. Yeom immediately tells her she looks as beautiful as a flower. When Soru doesn't believe her, Yeom insists that in a few years she will be even more extraordinary than Garan. She adds that the master, Jaeyeon, will surely... Before she can finish, Jaeyeon appears and asks what exactly he will do in a few more years. Jaeyeon tells Yeom to leave, but she immediately assumes he plans to scold Soru. She quickly says Soru did nothing wrong and that she was the one who said what he heard. Soru also tries to defend Yeom, which only makes Jaeyeon more frustrated. He says he understands and tells Yeom to go. This time, she finally leaves. Soru starts apologizing for what Yeom said, but Jaeyeon cuts her off and quickly brings up the recent deaths in the city. Soru had no idea about them. When he says the judges believe monsters are behind it, she remembers the death that happened because of her, and immediately blames herself for this too. She also assumes he came to send her away. Dead, he tells her the judges want to use her as bait to wipe out the monsters, since the monsters are after her. He makes it clear that he already refused, but she quickly says she will do it. He warns her how dangerous it will be, and she says that if she can help, she will do it willingly, even if it means facing danger. Tears fill her eyes as she explains why she wants to help. He asks if she doesn't hate people after everything they've done, persecuting her and taking advantage of her. She admits she's afraid of people, but she doesn't hate them. After that, he leaves to inform the judges that she agreed. Left alone, she thinks that whenever she talks to Jaeyeon, it feels like someone lights a fire in the middle of a dark night. It's a little scary and a little hot, but somehow comforting. She feels at ease because she can be useful to him again, and maybe now he won't send her away. That night, Ashita lays out the plan for Jaeyeon and Bir-young. They will spread a rumor that Soru is leaving the city to receive treatment. Jaeyeon will provide the carriage, and Ashita's men will disguise themselves as Soru's servants and travel with her as she leaves the capital. Charms will also be set up along the road so they can react quickly if the monster shows up. Jaeyeon says he'll go with them. Ashita immediately tells him no, saying the monster won't appear if Jaeyeon is there. Bir-young adds that Soru once said monsters can't get close to Jaeyeon. Ashita explains that generals are born with a gift that can wipe out monsters just by being nearby. Hearing that, Jaeyeon finally understands why Soru always begged to stay by his side. He still refuses to stay behind. Bir-young and Ashita are both shocked as Jaeyeon insists that he will go with them. On the day the plan is carried out, Soru thinks about her life. To her, the world feels like hell, a place full of chaos and cruel faces. No place ever felt safe except the maidservant's arms. The maidservant who raised her was the only person who never pushed her away. Then the monsters took her, leaving her alone in a harsh world. And after that, another monster came for her. Soru sits quietly while Jaeyeon paces the room, clearly anxious. He keeps telling her that she can still say no. He rambles about how this plan doesn't feel right and how they don't even know for sure if goblins exist, yet they're trying to catch one. He remembers what Ashita told him the night they made the plan, that the goblin will never appear if Jaeyeon is there, and that as long as the goblin lives, Soru will always be in danger. To calm him down, Ashita suggested using a flare. If anything goes wrong, they'll fire it, and Jaeyeon can rush over immediately. Jaeyeon starts explaining what she should do if the flare goes up and how long it will take him to reach her. She calmly assures him that everything will be fine and reminds him there are plenty of guards. Plus, he set his own trap too. He grips her shoulders and makes her promise not to step out of the carriage if the flare is fired until he arrives. She promises. He's about to say more when a servant interrupts to say it's time. Jaeyeon carries Soru outside and places her into the carriage. He mutters to Ashita that he hopes this isn't all nonsense, and Ashita replies that he hopes he won't have to use the flare. As the carriage moves, the crowd gathered in front of Jahoga starts shouting insults at Soru, openly relieved that she's finally leaving. The eyeless goblin lands on Ashita's shoulder and calls humans stupid for not realizing Soru is a celestial being. Ashita reminds him that monsters are the reason her reputation is ruined. The goblin fires back, saying that once monsters left her alone, humans got excited and tried to take her flesh themselves. If monsters hadn't interfered, she would have been torn apart already. Ashita has no answer to that. When they reach the city gates, Ashita tells everyone, including Biryong, to stay alert. Once they leave the city, the real attacks will begin. Far away, from the top of a mountain, Yato watches everything in silence. Years ago, a man fell into a river and began to drown. No one could save him. Yato, in his goblin form, pulled the man from the water. But the moment the villagers saw that a monster had saved him, they ran in terror. Some even returned with weapons. That was when Yato realized that no matter what he did, humans only saw a monster. He had been searching for answers, trying to understand why humans behaved the way they did. If his appearance was the reason they feared him, then he would change it. He took the drowning man's life and his body, then returned to the man's home wearing his face. The man's wife came out to greet her husband, overjoyed and relieved. She welcomed him warmly, and for a moment Yato believed he had been right. Perhaps his appearance truly had been the problem. Perhaps now he could learn why humans acted so strangely. But as soon as he spoke, she realized he was not her husband. After that, Yato stole many more faces. The outcome never changed. Sooner or later, someone would sense something was wrong and accuse him of being an imposter. Whenever that happened, he took their lives. He began to wonder what truly separated monsters from humans. One day, a monk captured him. Instead of attacking, the monk told Yato that humans possessed something monsters did not: the ability to love. He said Yato would never understand that feeling because he had taken too many lives. The thought that there was something he could never know filled Yato with anger. In his rage, he took the monk's life and took his appearance. Yet the monk's words lingered. If murdering prevented him from understanding love, then perhaps he should stop. Disguised as the monk, Yato found a blind boy begging on the streets and took him in. He decided to imitate love. He fed the boy, clothed him, and gave him shelter. He watched the child grow, even though he was tempted many times to devour him. He restrained himself. As years passed, the boy called him father. One day, the boy said he wished he could see his father's face just once. He cried as he spoke of wanting to know what the man he loved looked like. Yato wondered whether granting that wish would allow him to finally understand love. That night, he went to a nine-tailed fox and asked for medicine that could restore the boy's sight. She refused to give it freely and demanded the monk's head as payment. Yato hesitated, knowing how humans would react if they saw his true form, even if the boy gained his sight. The fox insisted that the boy would accept him regardless of how he looked. In the end, Yato agreed. Later, the boy awoke with Yato beside him, no longer disguised, but in his true form. He told the boy he brought medicine to fix his eyes, and the boy immediately noticed that something about his father's voice felt different. Yato urged him to drink it. As the boy swallowed the medicine, Yato thought that once the boy opened his eyes, he would finally understand what love is. The boy's eyes began to burn, and for a moment Yato worried that the nine-tailed fox tricked him. Then the boy starts to see. The boy slowly lifted his head to look at his father, but instead of a man, he saw a monster. Fear took over. He scrambled backward and even threw something at Yato. Yato couldn't understand why the boy was running away. He reached out to hold him, but the boy screamed in terror. Yato remembered the day the boy told him he loved him. Then, thinking of the monk's words, he took the boy's life. In that moment, he realized his hands existed only to destroy, and his mouth only to satisfy his hunger. Humans only love other humans. No one can love a monster like him. Not long after, he overheard the ghosts talking about a celestial being that was accidentally born inside a human girl in the palace. They said that if a monster ate a celestial being, it would be reborn as a human in the next life, which was why monsters are hunting her. Hearing this, Yato decided he would be the one to devour her. He believed that once he became human, he would finally understand love. In the present, Yato gives his goblins permission to attack Ashita and his group. The eyeless goblin warns Ashita that the goblins are coming. The ground begins to shake as a monster lunges forward, nearly killing one of Ashita's men, but Ashita quickly uses his magic to take it down. He tells everyone that the monsters will start attacking in groups and that they shouldn't panic. Then, someone warns him about a large group of monsters approaching from behind, making Ashita realize he isn't the only one waiting. At the same time, Soru senses the monsters closing in. Ashita and his men fight the monsters, but there are far too many of them. They are badly outnumbered. Yuran tells Ashita they can't keep going like this and urges him to come up with something. Ashita asks No Eyes if he can feel Yato's energy, but No Eyes says he can't. Ashita figures Yato is waiting for them to get exhausted before showing himself. He uses his magic to thin out the monsters a little, then tells Yuran that dragging this out will only put them at a bigger disadvantage. Just as Yuran is about to respond, Ashita warns her about a monster attacking from behind and takes it down himself. He tells her there's no real way to reduce the monsters properly unless he uses all of his charms. Then Yoren complains about the situation, saying she would rather be on an actual battlefield. She asks what the plan is, because at this rate, the monsters will break through their defenses. As Ashita is about to explain, Beryong suggests calling Jaehyun. He points out that once Yato appears, they won't be able to fight him. Their only option would be to give up the princess, which would be a total loss for them. It would be better to call Jaehyun, break the situation, and look for another chance later. At least they wouldn't lose Soru. Ashita hands Beryong the flare. When Beryong fires it, he mutters that a furious disaster is about to fall on them. That's when Ashita gets an idea. Back at Jahoga, Jaehyun paces back and forth, wondering why the fight is taking so long. When he sees the flare light up the sky, he immediately mounts his horse and rides out, praying Soru will still be safe when he arrives. On the battlefield, Soru covers her ears. She can hear the excitement in the monsters' voices as they devour humans, mixed with the sounds of people dying. Ashita enters the carriage and tells her he has a request. He leans in and whispers it to her. After listening, she agrees to do what he asks. Yato, watching from afar, sees Ashita carry Soru out of the carriage. He then hears Ashita tell Yoran that Soru has agreed to use her blood to heal the injured men. Yato leaps down from the mountain and lunges at Ashita, but a magical barrier stops him. Ashita, who is clearly expecting this, looks at him calmly and says it's nice to finally meet him, Yato. Then Ashita tells his men to begin the ritual. They do, trapping Yato in a barrier he can't escape as long as he remains a monster. Ashita thanks Soru for playing along, and Yoran offers to escort her back to the carriage. As she moves, Yato can't take his eyes off her. Ashita notices and asks him if that's how much he wants a celestial being. He starts rambling about Yato losing his food, and even brings up Yato's greed for taking human lives. Yato fires back, accusing humans of being greedy too, uprooting plants, burning trees, killing animals, fighting each other on battlefields, even eating human flesh, and asks why only humans are considered bad. Suddenly, Yato breaks through the barrier and slashes Ashita with his claws. Ashita realizes Yato is now half human, having eaten hundreds of human hearts, which is why the barrier can't hold him. Yato moves toward Ashita, saying he's heard that if he consumes 100 judges, he will become fully human, and grabs him. Yoran tries to strike Yato with her charms, but they have no effect. Ashita orders her to protect the princess first. Just then, Jaehyun arrives. He slices Yato's arm, and his light shines so brightly that the surrounding monsters scream in pain. Soru senses Jaehyun's energy, throws open the carriage, and shouts his name. He sees her and feels relief, but warns her not to come out because it's still dangerous. Beryong greets Jaehyun excitedly. Yato notices his injury isn't healing, and realizes that if he's this hurt, the other monsters will likely perish. Yoren helps Ashita, while Jaehyun asks what happened. Ashita explains he didn't expect his opponent to have set a trap as well. Jaehyun tells him to leave while he deals with Yato. Jaehyun remembers seeing Yato in the marketplace. Ashita warns him that their spells won't work. Yato is beyond a normal monster now. Yato asks Jaehyun why he feels this burning anger whenever they face each other, and without waiting for an answer, they clash. Yoran tries to help Jaehyun, but Beryong stops her, saying they'll only get in the way. Jaehyun feels like his attacks barely land, but he spots Yato's blind spot and slashes him there, forcing Yato to pull back. When Yato attacks again, Jaehyun stabs him, thinking it's over, but it isn't. Yato continues pressing forward, threatening to devour Jaehyun's heart, flesh, and bones. As he speaks, parts of him shift into his monstrous form. Soru senses the change in Yato's energy. It feels hauntingly familiar. Then Yato shocks Jaehyun by pulling his sword from his chest and attacks again. Jaehyun barely blocks this strike. He punches Yato in the face, but it only fuels the monster's rage. Yato declares that he will eat Jaehyun, and once he does, he will become human. At that moment, Soru steps out of the carriage and halts the fight. She commands Yato to release Jaehyun. Jaehyun shouts at her to go back inside, but she ignores him. She calls out to Yato, asking if he has come to eat her, and she calls him by name. Soru steps closer, and Jaehyun wishes she wouldn't. He can't bear to see her get hurt. She tells Yato that she didn't recognize him at first because his energy had changed, but he is still Yato, the monster who stole her eyes. She offers herself to him and asks him to let Jaehyun go. Jaehyun yells that she's being ridiculous. Yato releases Jaehyun and moves toward Soru, saying he wants to become human. He reaches for her, wanting to touch her, but Jaehyun grabs her first. Yato murmurs almost to himself, saying he wants to touch her hair, her hands, her face, and he sadly asks if everything will be different now. His words make Soru cry. They stare at each other for a long moment before he finally leaves. Yoren suggests chasing him, but Ashita refuses, knowing it would accomplish nothing. He turns to Soru, rapidly firing questions at her. If she knows Yato, if she's ever met him, why he didn't continue the fight, and more. Jaehyun stops him, saying they can discuss it later. For now, they need to make sure Soru isn't injured. He orders Biryong to investigate and report back to their allies. Once upon a time, there was a cursed princess living in the royal palace of Hiren, and somewhere behind it lurked a terrifying monster. That monster stole her eyes and ran away, and that was the beginning of everything. Soru was deeply shaken by the monsters. She cried constantly and couldn't sleep. The servants wouldn't even come near her, fearing they'd be cursed by that thing, as they called her. One day, terrified of being alone, she begged her nanny to stay with her while she tried to sleep. The nanny just handed her a ball, shook her head, and left her alone. Soru treasured that ball. It was the first gift she had ever received. One day, while playing outside, the ball slipped from her hands and rolled out the gate. She cried, calling herself foolish and bad. Then a black hand suddenly emerged from beneath the gate, holding the ball. Startled, she took it, and the hand quickly withdrew. She threw the ball back, crying, and the hand returned it again. For the first time, someone had helped her. From then on, she called the monster Yato, and they became almost friends. He claimed he hated her, and she asked why he always picked up the ball. She even told him she wanted him to be the one to eat her. She wanted him to exist in the world. In the present, Jaehyun checks Soru and sees she is unharmed, but immediately starts yelling at her for leaving the carriage. She points out that he was in danger, but he says he doesn't care. Then he asks if she knew the monster, noticing that she called him by name and seemed close. He presses her further. Would she have given her life to the monster if he hadn't stopped? And what exactly is her relationship with Yato? She stammers, words refusing to come out, then gently pulls her hand out of Jaehyun's grip. He tells her not to give herself away like that again. Biryong comes in to deliver his report, but pauses when he feels the tension between Soru and Jaehyun. Still, Jaehyun tells him to go ahead. Biryong reports that 5 people are severely injured and 3 are barely hanging on. Soru quickly says she'll heal them. Jaehyun tells her she clearly doesn't care about what he says, so he won't care anymore either. As he walks off, he adds that she can do whatever she wants. Later, Yoran wraps Soru's arm after drawing some blood. Soru tells Yoran and Ashita that Yato was one of the many monsters who wanted to eat her, and he took her eyes. Ashita asks if her eyes had some kind of power. Soru says she's not sure if it was a power, but her eyes were so bright she could see things others couldn't. Monsters, invisible things, sometimes even people's hearts, the past, the future, and even death. Ashita says Yato must have used her eyes to see the monster's fate. He explains to Soru that fate is the name carved into a monster's soul and asks if she has ever seen it. She says she has, but she couldn't read it because she never learned how to read. She never went to school. Ashita thinks that if Soru had learned to read, things might have been different. She wouldn't have struggled so much with the monsters. With eyes that see the truth, she could have become a great magician. She could have ruled over thousands of monsters and been known everywhere as a goddess. Instead, she ended up with a bad name and is called the Ghost Princess. The only thing she can really do with her divine power is heal people. Ashita says Yato is using her eyes to control all the monsters in Hiren. After eating hundreds of people, he's now half monster, half human. Something that's not easy to control. Soru says it's her fault. Ashita asks her to tell him everything she knows about Yato. She says that one day, all the monsters fought over who would get to eat her. Only one survived in the end, but it was badly hurt, so she healed it with her blood and named it Yato. Ashita and Yoran can't believe she named the very monster that wanted to eat her. She says it was because she wanted to be eaten. She was tired of watching people die because of her. She apologizes for giving up back then. Later, the group starts packing their things to leave. Yoran, after settling Soru asleep in the carriage, asks Ashita what they're going to do now. Ashita, who has clearly been thinking about it, tells Yoran to wait at Jehoga and then starts walking off. When Yoran asks where he's going, he simply says, "The palace." Deep in the woods, Yato lies on the ground, bleeding. His wounds still haven't healed, and he blames Jaehyun for it. He hates that he's a monster. To him, Soru looks like the moon. When he first saw her, monsters were already surrounding her. He couldn't eat her because of her divine power, so he decided to wait until she grew weak. When that time came, he would eat her and become a human god. As he watched her, he noticed that other humans hated her. That confused him. Humans usually love children. He figured she was afraid of monsters because she didn't know she was a god. One day, he saw her ball roll away and heard her crying. He picked it up and gave it back, hoping she would stop. She did, but not for long. The ball came back again, and so did the tears. "So you returned it again?" This time she smiled and thanked him. That caught him off guard. After that, strange things kept happening. She smiled, she cried, and he started feeling the urge to protect her. He didn't like that at all. He thought the only way to get rid of those feelings was to eat her quickly. Then someone died because of her. She cried and told the monsters to come eat her. The monsters got excited and rushed forward, and Yato had to rush in and fight them. Things turn chaotic. Monsters start eating each other. It's so brutal that it even leads to the fire at the palace. In the end, Yato is the only one left standing, but he badly injured and completely drained. He tells himself he'll eat Soru, become human. And once he's human, he'll finally understand love. He opens his mouth to eat her, but she suddenly hugs him and bites her lip until it bleeds. Then she heals him with her blood. That shocks him. Instead of running, she asks him to please eat her and live for her. Then she gives him the name Yato. He's confused. Why isn't she cursing him or yelling at him? Why is she comforting him and willingly offering herself to a monster? He tells her he doesn't want to eat her. He remembers the little boy he once took in, the way the boy became afraid of him after he returned his eyes. The boy looked at him like he was some ugly monster. That memory makes him angry. So in that anger, he takes Soru's eyes and eats them. He doesn't want her looking at him with those beautiful eyes. In the present, Ashita reads the memory of the burned palace. What he sees between Soru and Yato makes his eyes fill with tears. The eyeless goblin keeps rambling about how Ashita used magic to uncover Soru's hidden memories and asks what he was trying to learn about Yato. Ashita quickly wipes his tears and tells himself it's just a side effect of using his powers. Nothing more. He reminds himself that his only goal is to destroy monsters and save humans. That's all that matters. Days later, Jaeyeon meets with King Garyeon. The king tells him that the people are uneasy because of rumors that the ghost princess is summoning monsters, causing the recent deaths in the city. To prove that the royal family cares about the people, Garyeon decides to send Jaeyeon to the border. Jaeyeon asks why he's being sent away, and King Garyeon explains that it's a temporary measure to appease the people. Jaeyeon points out that he hasn't returned home for a year because of the war, and now he's being sent away again. Garyeon counters, asking if he wants the people to protest. Jaeyeon reminds the king that he promised not to send him away, and warns that doing so could make him lose the faith of the council, which angers Garyeon. He continues, saying that if the real culprit is found, the rumors will die down, but Garyeon cuts him off, blaming him for failing to catch the culprit. Hanbi steps in to defend Jaeyeon, suggesting that other officers should be sent instead. He adds that until the situation is resolved, Soru can return to the palace because when she was in the palace, the people were safe, though he understands that Soru retuning doesn't guarantee the murders will stop. The king objects, arguing that once a woman marries, she becomes an outsider to her family. Hanbi insists that calming the people is necessary, and the council members side with him. Garyeon finally says he will make a decision and orders everyone to leave. As Jaeyeon begins to leave, Hanbi stops him, asking to speak in private. On their way, Hanbi quotes, "Drops of water that have been spilled can't be taken back." When Jaeyeon asks what he means, Hanbi simply leads him into a room where all the council members Soru had healed are waiting. Inside, Hanbi tells Jaeyeon that the king has been spreading rumors about him through the eunuchs, which ignites Jaeyeon's anger. He also explains that Garyeon's dislike of Jaeyeon stems from his family. Hanbi then shifts the topic to Soru, saying he doesn't want her sent to the border. Jaeyeon agrees, unwilling to leave her alone, especially with Yato still out there. Hanbi reassures him that he would never let Soru be sent away. He warns that if she falls into the wrong hands, it would be disastrous. Jaeyeon reminds him that Soru is no longer healing anyone, but Hanbi counters that emergencies could still arise. For instance, someone on the verge of death, which frustrates Jaeyeon and prompts him to ask if Hanbi is plotting treason. Meanwhile, the servant Princess Garan sent to spy on Hanbi reports back that she saw him meeting Jaeyeon privately. Garan decides she needs to pay her father a visit. Garan wonders what Hanbi could have said to Jaeyeon. Lately, she's noticed shifts in loyalty. Nobles who usually sided with her father are now leaning the other way. She worries that if her father continues on this path, public opinion will turn against him. Determined, she decides to try and convince him to reconcile with Jaeyeon. When she arrives at her father's chambers, the eunuch begins to announce her, but she stops him, saying she wants to surprise her father. She pushes the door open, only to freeze at the sound of her father shouting at his assistant. King Garyeon holds a knife to the assistant's neck, venting his frustration over his inability to send Jaeyeon away and the possible return of Soru to the palace. The assistant tries to calm him, warning that if another murder occurs, the public will definitely protest. Garyeon cuts him off, insisting that Jaeyeon caught all the assassins, and declares that whether it's war or the ghost princess, Jaeyeon won't die. Perhaps he will have to take action himself. Garan is stunned by what she hears. She makes the eunuch swear not to tell her father that she came by, then quietly walks away, realizing that her father's true intention is to eliminate Jaeyeon. Garan wonders what she should do. Then she gets the idea to talk to Jaeyeon. She remembers how cold he was the last time they met and wonders if he was upset because of her father. Still, she is sure that no matter how angry he is, he will listen to her. That night, Jaeyeon thinks about telling Beryang about Hanbi's plan. Earlier, when Hanbi asked if he was planning treason, Jaeyeon reminded him that he was the one who told him to become king. Hanbi pointed at the other nobles in the room and said they had now become a problem for the king. If Jaeyeon is sent to the border, the king won't spare them since they supported him. He urged Jaeyeon to think carefully before making a move. Jaeyeon isn't sure if Hanbi is being sincere. Hanbi is known to be very cunning. Jaeyeon goes to look for Beryang, but a servant tells him he isn't around. Then she adds that she heard he is planning an uprising with the judges. Jaeyeon remembers Beryang saying he needed to fix the situation by catching the monster. He walks away, thinking about Soru, and tells himself he won't let her get close to Yato. Before he realizes it, he is standing in front of Soru's room. The lights are still on. He opens the door to check if she's asleep, but she's wide awake, dressed in her sleeping clothes. He quickly looks away, blushing, and tries to leave. She stops him, saying she has something to tell him. Earlier that day, Soru sat in her room, listening to the voices of people protesting outside Jehoga, shouting that she should be sent away. She didn't even let Yom close the doors or windows because she wanted to hear every word. After the battle with the monsters, Jaeyeon brought her back to Jehoga, and a few people saw them. They started saying she refused to leave and summoned her monsters to attack the people outside the city. Their words annoyed Jaeyeon so much that he threatened them with death. Since then, the protests haven't stopped. Yom told Soru not to pay attention to the people outside, but Soru only asked about Jaeyeon. When Yom said he had gone to the palace, she decided to wait for him. She spent the entire day waiting for him to return. When night fell, Yom told her to go to sleep since Jaeyeon still wasn't back. Soru refused. She was set on waiting for him. As she waited, she thought about meeting the magicians to find a way to stop the monsters. Then suddenly, the ghosts came back. They started blaming her for all the innocent people who died. They called her trash, selfish, and many other cruel names. Soru covers her ears and keeps telling herself again and again that she is not who the ghosts say she is. Then suddenly, the noise stops. Jaeyeon walks into the room, bringing us back to the present. He gently pulls the blanket over her and asks what she wanted to tell him. She asks if Yato has done more bad things. That question makes him furious. He starts shouting at her. She grabs onto him and says people have died. And if they leave things like this, Yato will come back. He yells, asking if she plans to be bait again. She says she will do what she can no matter what. She starts crying, saying she doesn't want to see anyone get hurt. It's her fault, and she can't take it anymore. Jaeyeon lifts her and carries her back to bed. He tells her that whatever the monsters do is not her fault. She has done her best, so she doesn't have to carry it all anymore. He wonders why she doesn't know how to protect herself, even just a little. He remembers when he was training to become the head of his family. Back then, people didn't believe he could do it. But as he grew older, people started taking advantage of him instead. The king kept sending him on missions no one else wanted to take. Soru tells Jaeyeon that she still wants to do something. She wants to help him. He gently touches her face and her lips, remembering the day she shyly asked to touch his face. He tells her not to worry and reminds her again that it isn't her fault. She tries to argue, but he raises his voice and tells her to go to bed. As he walks back to his room, he realizes that being around Soru makes him feel short of breath. She annoys him, yet he can't stand the thought of her being used or getting hurt. Meanwhile, Yato, slightly healed now, stands on a mountain when the old goblin approaches him, grumbling about Jaeyeon. Yato suddenly asks why humans cry. The old goblin thinks for a while before saying they probably cry when they're scared. What confuses him is that humans also cry when they see monsters. He says you can't trust human tears. They're crafty. The old goblin tells Yato he followed Jaeyeon home and saw people protesting at Jehoga, shouting that Soru should be sent away, or they would all die. He also followed some of the protesters and overheard them talking about getting paid to protest. The old goblin says humans call monsters evil, but they're just as bad. Yato tells him to take him to the protesters. The goblin happily thinks the hunt is back on and leads the way. Yato thinks to himself that he wants her. Very early in the morning, one of the protesters is about to enter his home when he is suddenly assassinated by someone he never even sees. Inside Jehoga, Soru is thinking about how Jaeyeon may look cold, but he's actually warm. Just then, Yom rushes into her room saying a corpse has been found right outside Jehoga, and the people are protesting again. Soru immediately tells Yom to take her to the gate. Outside, Jaeyeon's servants are holding the gates shut so the protesters can't force their way in. Yom tries to convince Soru to go back inside, but when one of the protesters shouts that they'll burn down Jehoga, Soru runs toward the gate, yelling that she's right there. Before she can reach it, Jaeyeon grabs her. He shouts at Yom to take Soru back inside and not let her step out of her room. As she watches him walk away, she thinks about how much trouble she's causing him. If she had known things would turn out like this, she wouldn't have begged to stay by his side. Jaeyeon opens the gate, catching the protesters off guard, and tells them to leave. They shout that they won't leave until the ghost princess is sent away. He tells them to blame the monsters and the incompetence of the royal court instead of accusing his wife without proof. He even tells them to fight the monsters themselves. The leader of the protesters says that's impossible. Jaeyeon asks if they decided it's easier to bully an innocent girl than to fight for themselves. The leader points at him and says he's been possessed by the ghost princess. The crowd agrees loudly. Jaeyeon grabs the man and dares him to repeat it. Then he throws him to the ground and warns them that if they come near his house again, he'll have them arrested. The crowd scatters. Just as Jaeyeon is about to head back inside, he suddenly feels Yato's presence. Jaeyeon turns around in anger to face Yato, but he doesn't see him. Still, he is sure Yato was there. He goes back inside the house, and one of the servants calls him to come check the body. They brought it inside because it was attracting a crowd. He tells the servant to call an official and hand over the body, then stops when he notices something strange. He examines the body and realizes it wasn't mutilated by a monster. It was done with a sword. At that moment, a messenger from the palace arrives and informs Jaeyeon that the king has summoned him. Meanwhile, Yato is with the old goblin, who keeps rambling about how humans are more cruel than monsters. Earlier, the old goblin had taken Yato to find one of the protesters, but before Yato could do anything, the man was grabbed by masked men and murdered. They tried to make it look like a monster attack. Yato and the goblin watched as Jaeyeon's servant found the body, the protests continued, and Jaeyeon threatened the crowd. The old goblin asked Yato if they should unalive someone else, but Yato said no. They should return. The goblin didn't like that at all since he was hoping for more action. Yato thinks Soru is probably safe for now. Then he suddenly remembers he was supposed to eat Soru. He asks himself if he came to Jehoga because he was afraid of losing his prey, or for some other reason. He still can't explain why he keeps going back to her side. Later, Jaeyeon arrives at the palace. Garyun begins talking about the chaos at Jehoga that morning, and doesn't even let Jaeyeon explain. He orders him to leave the capital within 3 months. As Jaeyeon walks out of the palace, he thinks this is the end of the road for him. He can no longer become Grand General, and that leaves him with no options. Just then, Garen's servant approaches him and says her master wants to see him. She shows him Garen's hair accessories to prove that Garen sent her. As Jaeyeon follows the servant, he wonders why Garen would call him. When he reaches her chambers, he is immediately struck by her beauty. She takes his hand and leads him to a chair, and he feels like the whole thing is unnatural. She starts talking about tea, but he cuts her off and asks why she called him. She asks if he is angry with her. She says she would understand if he is because of the way her father has humiliated him. He says he isn't. He thinks he risked his life to earn her. She asks if he hates her father, and without hesitation, he says yes. This shocks her, but she praises him for being honest. Then she tells him she was happy when she heard he asked her father for her hand in marriage. She prayed for him to return safely from the war, but when her father told her Jaeyeon was engaged to someone else, it broke her heart. Jaeyeon asks why she is telling him this, and she says it feels important, especially now that he is leaving the capital. Jaeyeon had almost forgotten about that. He slaps her hand away and starts to leave, saying only time will decide whether he truly leaves or not. She quickly follows him and tells him she knows about the secret meeting he had with Hanbi and the others. She pleads with him, saying she will convince her father to leave him alone, and in return, she will tell the nobles to stop turning their backs on her father. But Jaeyeon can only think about Soru. Garen pushes him to the floor and tries to seduce him with her beauty, saying she loves him. She even promises to be his. He suddenly switches their positions, telling himself that Garen is the woman he desires, and that it must not be Soru. The next morning, Yato stands in a corner watching the rain when a couple walks by. The woman is immediately drawn to how handsome he looks and offers to get him an umbrella. He refuses, saying he just wants to watch the rain. The woman thinks it's romantic. The man sighs, calls Yato a poet, and starts reciting a poem. When he finishes, the woman hugs him and calls him jealous. The man replies that jealousy is a sign of love. Hearing that, Yato walks away, thinking about love. He wonders why he keeps reaching for something he can't have. Then he thinks he will probably wander for the rest of his life, stuck with unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Jaeyeon walks home in the rain, thinking about what happened with Garan. He pulled away from her and refused to touch her, but when he tried to leave, she told him he couldn't go because the palace was heavily guarded. He didn't believe her at first. Then she said she would never deceive him and admitted she tried to seduce him for her father's sake. So he stayed. Out of nowhere, she said he seemed to care about his wife more than she expected. He didn't send Soru away after the wedding like people said he would, and he didn't send her away because of the protests. Jaeyeon replied that it was because he owed Soru. Garan then said he rejected her because of Soru and asked him to reconsider for Soru's sake. She talked about how Soru would also suffer if a civil war broke out. Then she begged him to give her a few days to convince her father to stop troubling him. Jaeyeon arrives home and sees Yam trying to get Soru back inside. He realizes she has been waiting for him. He can't believe she still cares after the way he treated her. He starts to reach out to her, but stops when he remembers Yato. Just then, Biryong runs up and asks where he has been. Jaeyeon says he can't say. As Jaeyeon dries off, Biryong keeps pressing him about where he went, but Jaeyeon still refuses to answer. This only annoys Biryong more. Biryong also says he was worried because Jaeyeon went to the palace and didn't return. Jaeyeon says he went out for a drink to clear his head. Then Biryong tells him that Hanbi mentioned their discussion, referring to the rebellion Hanbi had brought up earlier. Biryong asks if Jaeyeon is still unsure. Jaeyeon says he needs more time to think, but Biryong doesn't think there's anything to think about. Jaeyeon says he doesn't want to rush into something like this. Planning a rebellion isn't simple. He reminds Biryong that he was the one who advised him not to drag his entire family into his personal conflict. Biryong changes the subject to the bodies found in front of Jehoga and how they didn't look like they were killed by monsters. Jaeyeon says he suspects Garyun, but suspicion isn't proof. Biryong adds that the bodies were all palace servants. Palace servants became scared after seeing their co-workers die, so they confessed to Biryong that the king's eunuchs were paying people to protest in front of Jehoga. When the public anger started fading, the king would have one of his servants unalived to spark the outrage again. Jaeyeon can't believe the king would go that far just to push out a mere general. Biryong says Jaeyeon isn't just a general, and the king knows it. He can see that the throne is written in Jaeyeon's fate. Jaeyeon thinks Biryong is trying to push him into starting a rebellion, but Biryong insists he isn't. He reminds Jaeyeon of all the people on their side. Jaeyeon remembers his conversation with Garan and asks exactly how much time the king gave him to leave the capital. Biryong asks, what if the king discovers their plan before then? Jaeyeon says that if it's his fate, everything will fall into place. Meanwhile, Soru dreams that Yato appears before her, saying he wants to become human. She asks why he isn't eating her and tells him she won't stop him. He says he can't, but struggles to explain why. When he can't find the words, she reaches out to him, but then wakes up, calling his name. Lately, she has been having these nightmares more often. She thinks she can't just leave Yato like that and considers asking Jaeyeon for help. When she reaches her door, she overhears servants talking about Jaeyeon having an affair. They say he didn't return the night before and that there was lipstick on the clothes he wore. Hearing this, Soru becomes convinced that Jaeyeon has a lover. They even say that Princess Garan must be his lover and that he used to be deeply in love with her. They add that if they were married to the ghost princess, they would also stay out all night. Soru thinks it's better that Jaeyeon has a lover, because someone like her would only bring him bad luck. Besides, she was the one who told him not to treat her like a wife. But that doesn't stop her heart from hurting. She remembers telling him she wanted a peaceful life, yet now she finds herself wanting his heart. She thinks about Yato and wonders if this is how he feels. That night at the palace, Garyun wonders what Jaeyeon is planning. From what he knows, Jaeyeon hasn't made any major moves. He hasn't stormed into the palace like before, and he hasn't tried to leave either. Garyun wonders if Jaeyeon has accepted defeat, but he doesn't believe that for a second. Jaeyeon is the type who gets back up no matter how many times he is knocked down. Garyun is certain he is planning something and waiting for the right moment to strike. Just then, Garen arrives and greets her father warmly. She tells him she wants to ask for a favor and makes him promise he will say yes. He agrees, and she feels hopeful that she can change his mind. She asks him to reconsider sending Jaeyeon away and explains how it will affect the king. But before she can finish, Garyun shouts that she has chosen Jaeyeon's side. He grabs her and yells that he is the king, so why does everyone follow Jaeyeon instead of him? He even threatens to assassinate Jaeyeon while Garen tries to explain. To make things worse, one of the eunuchs reports that the spy they placed on Jaeyeon says he spent the night at Garen's palace. Garyun brutally beats Garan, not allowing her to explain anything. He believes she has betrayed him. She tells him she did it for his sake. Suddenly, he softens and asks if she was only pretending with Jaeyeon. Then he tells her that if she truly did it for him, she should lure Jaeyeon to the palace. The next morning, Garen's servant visits Jaeyeon again, showing him Garen's hairpin like before. Jaeyeon wonders if Garen has convinced her father and decides to go to the palace. As Jaeyeon heads out of the house, Soru suddenly rushes to him and starts checking everywhere to see if he is hurt. He looks at Yeom in confusion, and Yeom explains that Soru just woke up and began panicking. Jaeyeon tells Soru that he's fine and asks what happened. She says she had a nightmare, but this one was different because it was about him. In the dream, the monsters were devouring him. When she woke up, she couldn't feel his presence nearby, so she thought something had happened to him. Then she apologizes for overreacting since he is clearly okay. Jaeyeon ignores her explanation and asks if she is still having nightmares. He also says she has gotten thinner from not eating properly. She insists she has been eating well. He asks if she's craving anything and says he will buy it on his way back. Before she can refuse, he suggests flour taffy, which makes her blush. As he walks away, she feels relief knowing he is safe. Then she notices a dark aura around him. She rushes and hugs him tightly, saying he can't leave. She starts rambling about how her nanny and servant never returned alive, which confuses him. Garen's hairpin falls from his pocket, and she sees a dark aura around it as well. She tells him that whoever gave it to him is trying to harm him, and if he leaves now, he will be in serious danger. Jaeyeon says that can't be possible because of who gave it to him. Before he can say the name, Soru says she knows it was his lover who gave him the hairpin. She says she knows he is in love with another woman, and if that makes him happy, she doesn't care. Jaeyeon suddenly slams her against the wall and starts yelling at her. He says he hasn't been happy since the day she arrived. He says he should have never let her stay and should have sent her far away. Then he wouldn't be in this situation now. He turns away in frustration. Soru apologizes and tells him he can send her away if he wants. She won't complain, but he shouldn't leave. Jaeyeon wonders why he always makes her cry. It makes him feel like a monster. He pushes her hand away and tells her not to make him lose the little sympathy he has left for her. He calls her an eyesore and tells Yeom to take Soru back inside and make sure she doesn't come out. Soru watches the monsters laughing as Jaeyeon walks away. She remembers all the time they spent together and realizes she wants to save him, even if it means being pushed away for good. So she runs after him, shouting his name. He doesn't answer. She stumbles and falls, but he still doesn't come back. Then the protesters see her and start blaming her for everything. They begin beating her, planning to take her life. But all she can think about is Jaeyeon. She prays that death takes her instead of him. Suddenly, the attackers are all knocked down, and she is lifted up by Yato. She begs him to save her husband, and he asks why. She says it's because Jaeyeon was the first person to show her warmth. He was the only one who allowed her to stay by his side, so she wants to protect him. She loses consciousness, and Yato agrees to help. As Jaeyeon heads to the palace, he thinks about his earlier argument with Soru, and wonders why he keeps letting his emotions control him. All he has ever wanted is to restore his family's honor, but now everything feels like a mess. When he sees Garen, he asks if she failed to convince the king. She says it's a long story and offers him tea. He hesitates, remembering Soru telling him not to go, but he still drinks it. He asks what the king said, but Garen doesn't answer. That's when he notices bruises on her neck, and he suddenly feels dizzy. He falls to the ground as Garen starts apologizing and begging for forgiveness. At that moment, Garyun enters with his sword, saying that at last he will be free from his suffering. Jaeyeon asks why he is doing all this to a mere general while secretly grabbing shards of the broken teacup. Garyun replies that it is because Jaeyeon reminds him of his brother, Seryun. Seryun was noble, intelligent, and admired by everyone. When he fell ill and died, the entire nation mourned him. People said that if he had become king, the kingdom would have entered a golden age. They compared Garyun to his brother and wished he were more like Seryun, which filled him with anger. Even Sinyul once told him that he had spent his life being compared to Seryun, and would never surpass him now that Seryun was dead. Those words trapped him in misery. So when Garyun met Jaeyeon, he saw Seryun in him. Garyun tells Jaeyeon that he is the man he has been searching for all his life. He says Jaeyeon cannot understand the pain of standing before someone who constantly reminds him of his own failures. Jaeyeon mocks him, and Garyun attacks, but misses as Jaeyeon rolls away. Jaeyeon throws the glass shards at him and uses the moment to stagger back, thinking he needs to buy time until the poison wears off. But he doesn't get far. Garyun slashes his back, sending him to the ground. Laughing wildly, Garyun declares that today will be the day Jaeyeon dies. Garyun steps on Jaeyeon and tells him to beg for his life and promise never to step out of line again. Jaeyeon asks what proof he has that Garyun will keep his word, which only makes him more furious. Garyun kicks him again and presses his sword against his neck, shouting that he will cut open Jaeyeon's chest and throw his body into the streets so people will think monsters killed him. Jaeyeon wishes he had listened to Soru. He hopes she won't cry for him. He has lived his life the way he wanted, and always knew it would end one day. His only worry is what will happen to Soru after he is gone. He wonders if someone like him will take advantage of her again, or if she will end up suffering alone. Garyun raises his sword to finish him, but at that moment, Yato appears and drives his hand through Garyun's chest. Garyun turns to look at the one who killed him, and the face he sees shocks him. It looks like his brother, Sinyul. He falls to the ground and dies. The last thing Jaehyun sees before losing consciousness is Yato staring down at him. Meanwhile, Ashita and Yuran arrive at the abandoned palace where the exorcist tracking Yato saw him go. While Yuran sets up a barrier around the area, Ashita steps inside, thinking the place hasn't been touched in at least 10 years. Biryong had told Ashita that he recognized Yato in town as Prince Sinyul, the prince who was imprisoned in the abandoned palace for being involved with the king's concubine, though he doesn't know how Sinyul became a monster. Biryong was the one who arranged for Ashita and his group to enter the palace safely, on the condition that if Ashita killed any monsters there, all credit would go to Jaehyun's family. When Yuran joins Ashita, they realize the abandoned palace is now filled with monsters. Then Yuran notices light coming from one of the rooms, which is strange since monsters don't usually use light. They enter and find Soru lying there, unconscious and injured. As they check on her, they don't notice a goblin watching them from the ceiling, drooling. And suddenly, the goblin leaps down. Ashita uses his charm to calm the goblin. He had already sensed the dark energy coming from it. He asks where the other goblins are, and the goblin says he is the only one. The others won't appear unless he, Yato, calls them. When Ashita asks where Yato is, the goblin says Yato left the princess there and walked off without saying anything. Ashita assumes the goblin hurt Soru out of anger, but the goblin quickly denies it. He says Yato was the one who saved Soru from those cruel humans. Ashita and Yuran believe him, though Ashita can't believe a goblin would care about a human. As they are about to leave, Ashita notices a robe filled with dark energy and asks who it belongs to. The goblin says it likely belonged to the one who used to live there, Sinyul. Ashita uses his magic to read the robe's memories. He sees Sinyul yelling at Soru's nanny, asking why she hasn't killed Soru yet. He insults her and pulls her hair. He says his father will never forgive him as long as Soru, whom he calls a wench, is alive, and that killing her is the only way he can be free. Then he suddenly softens, hugs the nanny, and says she is the only one who can save him. He begs her to kill Soru, and she agrees. After the nanny leaves, Sinyul says he will tear her apart once he escapes. As soon as he reaches the king's palace, he plans to kill everyone who can find him to the abandoned palace. Days later, the nanny returns. Sinyul eagerly asks if she did it. The nanny asks why he doesn't love Soru, which shocks him, since she is supposed to be mute. But he doesn't dwell on it and demands an answer. The nanny repeats her question as she suddenly lunges for his heart. That is when Ashita realizes that it was Yato. After Yato took Sinyul's life, he took his body, saying he longs to feel what humans feel. Yoren interrupts Ashita, saying Yato is almost there, and that the barrier is complete. Ashita asks about Soru, then thinks about why a monster that harms humans cannot be allowed to live. Tears fall from his eyes as he vows to free Yato from his suffering. Yato heads toward the abandoned palace, but he stops to wipe the blood off his body because he remembers that Soru doesn't like blood. He wonders where he should take her. He thinks about bringing her back to Jaehyun, but decides against it. If he takes her away, Jaehyun will never find them. He remembers how she cried and begged him to save Jaehyun. Every time he imagines Soru and Jaehyun together, his stomach turns. He tells himself that he will soon become human, and when that happens, he will finally understand his pain. He goes to the room where he kept Soru, but when he pulls back the blanket, he sees a wooden figure with Ashita's charm. Suddenly, the place explodes, and Yato can't move. Ashita tells him the spell increases the divine power inside him, and divine power can purify what is evil. Yato partially transforms into his true form and demands to know where Soru is. He says she is hurt and needs treatment, so Ashita should return her. He even promises to do whatever Ashita wants. Then he uses his power as he commands Ashita to give him Soru. Ashita struggles to hold him down and tells him he is only a monster. Yato repeats that word over and over. Yato then asks if it is really impossible for him to think about Soru, want her, or hold her in his heart. He asks Ashita if he can't see how hard he is trying. He looks so desperate that Ashita has to remind himself that Yato is a monster who has taken hundreds of lives. Yato pushes Ashita to the ground with such force that the floor cracks. He says all he wants is to understand Soru and feel her presence. At that moment, Yoren appears with an unconscious Soru on her back. When Yato sees her, he turns away and starts walking off. Ashita tells Yoran to send everyone after Yato before he regains his strength. He wants to end everything now. Yato says sadly that all he wants is to love the princess. Later, Soru wakes up to find Yum crying beside her. She remembers her last conversation with Jaeyeon and asks if something happened to him. Yum tries to make Soru lie back down, but then she starts crying and shouting at Soru for thinking about someone else. She asks why Soru would chase after a man who doesn't care about her. She says Jaeyeon is fine, but Soru isn't. The doctor said Soru was injured all over and might have long-term effects. Soru comforts Yum just as Biryong enters the room. He asks to speak with Soru privately. Yum strongly refuses, but Soru tells her to leave. Biryong begins by telling Soru that she was found at the abandoned palace and asks what she remembers. She recalls being attacked by the protesters and running after Jaeyeon, then asks about him. Biryong tells her that Yato took the life of all the people who hurt her and then fled to the mountains. The judges are currently chasing him. As for Jaeyeon, he was severely injured in his fight with Garyun, so they used blood from Soru to heal him. Biryong apologizes for using her blood without permission, but she says she doesn't mind. She would have done the same if she had been awake. Biryong also tells her that Yato saved Jaeyeon's life. Soru realizes that Yato killed Garyun because of her. Then Biryong says they are planning a rebellion to make Jaeyeon king, and they will need the people's support. However, that will be difficult as long as Soru stays by his side. He tells her to leave the capital before Jaeyeon wakes up. He adds that Jaeyeon would object because he feels responsible for her, and says he will prepare a place for her to stay. Soru starts to argue, but she remembers how Jaeyeon treated her. In the end, she only asks Biryong to take her to the mountain where Yato is. She says Yato's eyes belong to her, and if she focuses, she might be able to find him. Biryong refuses at first, but after thinking about it, he agrees. As they leave, Yum tries to stop them, but a servant holds her back. Soru wishes she had made this choice earlier instead of letting everyone suffer. She didn't because she couldn't let go of Jaeyeon's warmth. When they reach the mountain, Yoran makes it clear that Soru shouldn't be there. But when Biryong explains why he brought her, Yoran tells Soru to give them Yato's location and leave. To everyone's surprise, Soru says she will go herself and convince Yato to stop hurting people. Ashita argues that Yato can't be stopped. Soru replies that he will stop, because if she fails to persuade him, she will become his prey. Ashita asks why she is willing to go that far for Yato. She replies that she knows what it feels like to wait forever for someone to want her and stay by her side. She knows the pain of reaching for someone who can never be reached. So how could she ignore Yato, the only being who ever desired her? She says she wants to save him, and she is no better than he is. When Ashita still refuses, Soru kneels. She promises not to trouble anyone again and asks that she and Yato be allowed to live quietly in the shadows. Ashita refuses once more. She asks if the flawed are not allowed to live on this earth. Then she asks Ashita to take her life along with Yato's, since she was the one who helped make him such a powerful monster. She takes responsibility for all the crimes he committed and says they will spend the rest of their lives in atonement, so Ashita should show mercy. After some hesitation, Ashita says he won't stand in her way. She thanks him and commands the forest to open before her, and it does. Biryong tries to stop her, but the trees block him. Ashita tells him it is over. Soru regains her eyesight, meaning Yato has grown weaker. The ghosts gather around her, shouting that the princess has entered the valley. She simply says, "Be gone," and they immediately disappear. She realizes her dreams about Yato were real. He was trying to call out to her. She wishes he hadn't done what he did. She finds him beneath a rock, weak and covered in blood. When she reaches out to touch him, he stops her and says she is like the moon and must not be stained by touching him. She hugs him anyway and tells him she understands that everything he did was for her, including taking her eyes. She apologizes for realizing it too late and suggests they run away together. After that, Soru goes to Jaeyeon, who is still unconscious. She feels sad that she cannot say a proper goodbye, but she thinks this is for the best. She is sure she is the last person he would want to see. She leans on him, thanks him for giving her peace, and apologizes for causing him so much trouble. She bites her lip until it bleeds, then kisses the wound on his chest. She looks at his lips and kisses him as well. When she pulls away, he suddenly grabs her and kisses her back. He murmurs, "Don't cry." For a brief moment, she thinks he is awake, but he isn't. As she leaves, she wishes she had known him better. She wonders if that would have been possible if she had been born normal. Then she tells herself that if she had been normal, Jaeyeon would never have looked at her. She would have just been another secret admirer in the city. She thanks him for letting her stay by his side, feeling comforted by the thought that he will continue living in this dark world, carrying his light, even if she will no longer be there to see it. She then goes to Yom, who is fast asleep. She places a bouquet of flowers beside her and thanks her for everything. When she finishes, she goes outside, where Yato is waiting. He asks if she has changed her mind about leaving with him. When she says she hasn't, he reminds her that he is a monster. She tells him he can remain as he is. He does not need to become human. He says he has nothing to offer her, but she assures him that they are the same. She says they should live quietly together and leave the violence behind. He agrees and hugs her. The next morning, Jaeyeon sees flashes of Soru saying goodbye. And the kiss. When he wakes up fully, he looks around his room and calls her name. In his dream, he kisses Soru all over and tells her that he always wanted to comfort her whenever she cried. But instead, he kept pushing her away and hurting her because he was afraid. He hugs her and suggests they move to the borderlands together. It is quieter there, so it would be better for her. She could watch the snowfall, and even though it is cold, he would buy her enough clothes to keep her warm. He apologizes for how he treated her. She tells him to stay well, and then he wakes up shouting her name. The last thing he remembers is being on the edge of death and Yato saving him. He notices that all his injuries are gone and immediately realizes Soru must have used her blood to heal him. That means he wasn't dreaming about her kiss. One of his servants rushes in and offers to call Biryong, but Jaeyeon demands to see Soru instead. The servant nervously tells him that Soru has left. Her room is empty, and they can't find her anywhere. Jaeyeon shouts in anger. He remembers her telling him to stay well, then storms out of the room and heads straight to Soru's quarters. When he doesn't find her there, he searches the entire house, calling her name over and over, insisting in his mind that she would never leave him. Biryong finds him searching the bushes. As soon as Jaeyeon sees him, he grabs him by the shirt and demands to know where Soru is and what happened. Biryong tells him that Soru disappeared 2 days ago, the same length of time Jaeyeon has been unconscious. Jaeyeon asks if he didn't try to look for her. Biryong says he is still searching, but there are more urgent matters to handle. This only makes Jaeyeon angrier. He cannot understand what could be more important than finding Soru. He remembers the harsh things he said to her the last time they met, and he collapses to the ground, crying. Seeing him cry shocks Biryong, and even Jaeyeon himself because he never cries. After Soru disappears, no more corpses show up in the city, the monsters vanish, and the people feel relieved. Yoren tells Ashita that they have been summoned back to the south by their master, since Yato is no longer a threat. Yoren doesn't think they should leave so quickly. Ashita says they should go anyway, since Soru kept her promise. He also wants to leave before chaos breaks out after the king's death. The No-Eyes goblin is excited about returning to the south and grabs something, suggesting they get rid of it. But Ashita says he wants to keep it as a pet since they have already tamed it. Yoren suggests they should destroy the bird, while the No-Eyes point out that it has been useful. Ashita says it will be even more helpful, and mentions the treasure that the No-Eyes told him about. As for Jaeyeon, he dreams about the day he married Soru, but not exactly how it happened. In the dream, he comforts her when she feels nervous drinking the marriage wine. After saving her during the palace attack, he carries her somewhere safe. When she begs to stay by his side and promises to be helpful, he tells her he will protect her whether she is helpful or not, because she is his wife. He then suggests they move to the borderlands to live peacefully. She agrees, and they spend their days watching the snow and eating flour taffy happily. Seeing Soru so happy relieves him so much that he cries. He wakes up in tears, and when his servant sees him, they call for a doctor. Years later, Garen tries to persuade Jaeyeon to leave the fighting to his generals and addresses him as Your Majesty. Jaeyeon tells his new wife, Garen, not to worry and says she will keep her throne after he dies. Then he leaves the room. Biryong tells him that Garen is right. A king who leaves the palace open and has no heir will only attract ambitious opportunists. So Jaeyeon, whom Biryong now calls Your Majesty, should name a successor as soon as possible. Jaeyeon tells Biryong that if he isn't satisfied, he should overthrow him and find a new king. Biryong then asks if Jaeyeon still hasn't forgotten her. Soru. After that, he calms down and suggests that Jaeyeon take a walk in town in disguise, since he hasn't done that since becoming king. They go to the night market, which is now larger than before. Jaeyeon sees a vendor selling flour taffy and buys some. When he tastes it, it feels bland to him, just like his life has been for the past few years. Biryong suggests they visit Jahoga, which is nearby, since Jaeyeon hasn't been there since he became king. When they arrive, they notice the side door is open. The house doesn't look abandoned either. Then they hear music. The sound reminds Jaeyeon of Soru. His heart starts racing, and he runs deeper into the compound, wondering if it could really be her. There, he sees the back of a woman tending to the flowers. The woman turns around, and it turns out to be Yum. She bows when she sees Jaeyeon and greets him. He asks what she is doing there, since he dismissed all his servants after moving to the palace. Yom reluctantly explains that she is taking care of the flowers for Soru, because Soru used to love the garden. Jaeyeon realizes he never knew Soru liked flowers, and remembers that he once gave her one. After that, Jaeyeon and Biryong go to a hotel restaurant to drink. Biryong suggests they stay the night there since there is a vacant room, which is unusual during a festival. The server explains that the room became empty after a couple checked out. They didn't come for the festival. They came looking for a doctor who could heal the wife, who was very sick. The server keeps talking about how sweet the couple was and how caring the husband was toward his wife. After the server leaves, Biryong suggests that Jaeyeon drink and let the past go. He says it has been 3 years and it is time to move on. Biryong admits that he still thinks about the day Soru left. He wonders if he should have stopped her back then, but he didn't, for Jaeyeon's sake. He thought she was holding Jaeyeon back and never imagined it would leave him this miserable. Jaeyeon begins to think about forgetting, but then he sees a couple who look very much like Yato and Soru. He immediately runs after them. The crowd is too dense and he can't reach them, so he shouts her name. He wants to tell her something he never got the chance to say. He falls to the ground in pain, realizing that he will never forget what he lost until the day he dies. He will spend the rest of his life longing for her and chasing her shadow. Deep inside the valley, Soru lies in bed, sick, while Yato takes care of her. The old goblin says this is the 5th time she has fallen ill, which is not surprising since the valley isn't suitable for humans. He asks for payment for always bringing her medicine and even requests a few drops of her blood as compensation. Yato immediately grabs him by the throat, reminding him that he knows his name. The old goblin quickly says he was only joking and adds that someone else is after Soru. Yato had told him to watch for anything unusual. The old goblin reports that the great monster Nagi, who once made all the monsters in the valley tremble, has recently appeared and devoured several goblins. He is certain Nagi won't come after Yato soon, because he wouldn't stand a chance if Yato called his true name. But if Nagi gathers an army, then Yato will have a problem. The goblin suggests that Yato deal with Nagi now, but Yato hesitates. He can't leave Soru alone in the valley. Later, when Soru wakes up, Yato gives her porridge so she can eat before taking her medicine. Seeing a monster caring for a human makes Soru laugh. Yato says it feels natural, since he once took care of a child. But remembering that boy makes him sad. As time passes, Soru plays in the stream while Yato patiently waits for her. With each passing day, his hunger for her grows stronger. He wants to devour her. One day, she says she is hungry and that they should eat lunch together. She eats while Yato watches. Seeing her eat makes him feel calmer. She tells him to eat too, but he refuses, saying he will still feel hungry anyway. Before he can stop her, she shoves a piece of food into his mouth. In the process, her hand gets cut on his teeth. A bit of her blood touches his lips, and he finds it incredibly sweet. He begins licking her wound, but then loses control and pounces on her. In that moment, he thinks he wants to make her his. She calls his name and asks if he is okay. He quickly pulls away from her, wondering what he was about to do. She tries to speak to him, but he only says they should head home before it gets dark. As the sun sets, he carries her back. She asks if there are flowers in the valley because she can smell them. He tells her it's moss. The valley only gets light at dusk, so nothing grows there except moss. Soru decides to call them moss flowers. Yato agrees, but he thinks that won't change the fact that they are still just weeds. Real flowers would only wither in the valley. That night, after Soru falls asleep, Yato senses a dark aura. He immediately knows it is Nagi. He decides to deal with Nagi before Soru wakes up. On nights like this, the last lunar cycle, monsters can absorb negative energy. But a being like Yato, who holds both divine and wicked power, would cause chaos. That is why Nagi chose this night to attack him. Nagi strikes first, and they begin to fight. Hours later, Soru wakes up and can see again, which surprises her. She notices Yato sitting in a corner, badly injured. She rushes to him and asks what happened. He says it was just a small fight. She tries to heal him with her blood, but he stops her, saying he will recover on his own. When she insists, he tells her he would rather be torn apart and bleed to death than take even a single drop of her blood or cause her the smallest wound. She agrees to wait and lets him decide, but says she will stay with him until he fully recovers. Then he asks her to take him somewhere. She brings him to the moss field they passed earlier. He tells her to look into his eyes and reveals his true name. Now that she knows it, he says he belongs to her. He reminds her that she once said she didn't have much heart to give him, and he doesn't have a heart either. So instead, he will give her everything. He realizes the one he had been searching for was with him all along. She begins to cry, which makes him nervous. But then she kisses him. And with that, this beautiful story comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, please rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 below. Until next time, ciao!